Hello, and welcome to this segment of my capstone series, From Structure to Synergy, Evolving into a Values-Driven PM Generalist. In this section, I'll focus on the first critical cluster of PMI principles: leadership, team, development, stewardship, and adaptability and resiliency. These principles create the foundation of effective project management, building strong, ethical leadership, fostering resilient teams, protecting long-term value, and adapting to the constant changes that define complex environments. As someone committed to growing from a procurement agent into a project manager at ISEC, mastering these foundational elements is critical not just for project success, but for earning trust, empowering teams, and leading with integrity at every level. Integration. These principles don't exist in silos. Leadership sets the tone for teams, while stewardship ensures that choices are responsible and aligned with long-term goals. Systems thinking ties it all together by ensuring I consider the downstream impacts of every decision. Together, these four principles create the foundation for resilient, ethical, and people-centered project management. Principle one, leadership. The PMI principle of leadership is defined as demonstrate and adapt leadership behaviors to support individual and team needs. Effective leadership promotes project success and contributes to positive project outcomes. Any project team member can demonstrate leadership behaviors. Leadership is different than authority. Effective leaders adapt their style to the situation. Effective leaders recognize differences in motivation among project team members. Leadership demonstrate desired behavior in areas of honesty, integrity, and ethical conduct. I originally understood leadership as structured delegation and decision making. However, PMI's definition helped me recognize that leadership is much more about influence, ethics, and adaptability. I updated my understanding to reflect the idea that leadership requires emotional intelligence, empowerment, and the ability to serve the team. To demonstrate this, my first example, the leadership theory matrix from Organizational Leadership 510. In Organizational Leadership 510, I was tasked with exploring and comparing a wide range of leadership theories and concepts to understand their application in real-world settings. My goal was to assess how various leadership styles, such as transformational, servant, and situational leadership, impact team dynamics and project outcomes. I developed a detailed leadership matrix comparing multiple leadership styles and their traits, benefits, and limitations. This helped me reflect on my own natural leadership tendencies and biases. For instance, I identified strongly with servant leadership due to my people first philosophy. However, I also recognize its limitations, like the risk of team dependency. To counterbalance that, I began incorporating situational leadership practices, promoting autonomy and adaptability within teams. This reflection shaped how I led and contributed to team environments throughout the program. It helped me adapt my leadership style to the context of each project, ensuring I was supportive but not overbearing. As a result, I was able to build teams that were more engaged, self-reliant, and committed to our shared goals. The next example is Team Fuchisa's leadership challenges in Project Management 531. In the Team Fuchisa case study, I analyzed the performance of a cross-functional product team assigned to integrate a new payment method in just 8 weeks, despite stakeholder recommendations for 16. The team consisted of developers, a PM, designer, and engineering lead, all under high-pressure deadlines. My task was to diagnose the leadership challenges that contributed to the project's underperformance and propose research-backed solutions. This included connecting theory to practice and mapping failure points to specific leadership competencies. I broke the case down in 7 critical failures, including unrealistic scoping, communication breakdowns, inadequate stakeholder engagement, and burnout. I aligned each challenge with the literature. For example, I connected the lack of realistic timelines and planning to procedural leadership gaps, and the communication silos to failures in shared and relational leadership. I then offered practical remedies like stakeholder feedback and strategies, integrated testing cycles, and resilience building practices within the teams. The final deliverable clearly illustrated how leadership, not team incompetence, was the root of the dysfunction. The analysis emphasized how procedural, relational, and transformational leadership breakdowns undermine trust, morale, and delivery. It helped me internalize how flexible, ethical, and well-structured leadership directly affects project health and human performance. It also served as a framework I now apply when assessing risks tied to leadership styles. Next example is the White Team Charter from Project Management 533. During Project Management 533, I was elected team leader for the White Team. We were responsible for developing a comprehensive stakeholder engagement strategy, and I inherited a team with varying communication styles, availability constraints, and different expectations around leadership. My primary challenge was to unify the team through structure, establish mutual accountability, and ensure the quality and punctuality of our deliverables, all while maintaining morale and inclusivity. Drawing from my organizational leadership 510 leadership matrix, I applied both servant and situational leadership. I used servant leadership to build psychological safety by prioritizing open communication, giving praise, and checking in frequently with teammates. At the same time, I adapt situational leadership to respond to different teammate needs and task urgency, stepping in assertively when clarity or pacing was lacking. I helped lead the creation of a detailed team charter implementing a soft and hard deadline strategy and encouraged distributed leadership across our subtasks. I also built our norms around risk prevention, performance monitoring, and proactive communication, many of which directly address the leadership failures I identified in Project Management 531, the Team for Cheesa case study, such as scope mismanagement, stress under pressure, and siloed communication. The results spoke for themselves. We never missed a deadline, completed several assignments early, and our internal team feedback was unanimously positive. Members said they felt supported, clear about expectations, and the project felt collaborative rather than stressful. More importantly, I demonstrated that theory-informed leadership, balance between empathy and structure, can create high-functioning teams even in remote environments. To integrate all of this, I would say that effective leadership doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's expressed and proven through how well a project leader cultivates and empowers a team. While leadership is about influence, ethical decision making, and setting the tone, team is where the influence takes root in the trust, culture, and collaboration that the leader fosters. A strong leader creates clarity, psychological safety, and shared ownership within a team. In turn, a high functioning team reflects back the effectiveness of that leadership through engagement, innovation, and resilience under pressure. Poor leadership fractures teams, strong leadership develops them. At the same time, great teams don't just follow leaders, they inform them. By listening closely to team dynamics and leveraging collective intelligence, leaders become more adaptive, inclusive, and people focused. In short, leadership sets the tone, sets the conditions, team reveals the outcomes. Together, they shape the culture that drives project success. My last example for this is how I apply it to ISEC, leading without authority. At ISEC, as a newly onboarded procurement agent, I quickly realized that many purchasing processes were fragmented across teams. Detailers, PMs, and warehouse teams each had priority demands, but no shared system to track urgent needs, leading to order delays, misaligned deliveries, and job site pressure. Though I had no formal authority over these functions, I took initiative to lead by influence. My goal was to improve communication and proactively surface system-wide gaps that were affecting project execution. I initiated informal work sessions with project managers and detailers to identify pain points in the handoff from drawings to procurement. I then created a basic visibility tracker inside ComSense that included urgency tags, manufacturer ETA notes, and project-specific delivery notes. I shared this in team meetings and began tagging PMs when changes affected them. While the tool was unofficial, it immediately reduced confusion and helped two PMs avoid critical coordination gaps with the warehouse. More importantly, it began shifting how people view procurement from reactive to proactive. This experience affirmed that leadership isn't about control, it's about service, clarity, influence, and I led through action, empathy, and foresight. Next is team. Project teams are made up of individuals who wield diverse skills, knowledge, and experience. Project teams that work collaboratively can accomplish a shared objective more effectively and efficiently than individuals working on their own. Projects are delivered by project teams. Project teams work within organizational and professional cultures and guidelines, often establishing their own local control culture. The collaborative project team environment facilitates alignment with other organizational cultures and guidelines, individual and team learning and development, optimal contributions to deliver desired outcomes. That was the PMI definition. For me, I originally thought of team as simply getting the right roles assigned to the right tasks. PMI's definition helped me see the team as a dynamic culture of collaboration and learning. I adjusted my understanding to reflect that teams are complex social systems with their own cultures, which must be nurtured. With that said, some examples of it in action is the team principal, project management 533 white team. In project management 533, our white team was tasked with developing a full stakeholder engagement strategy based on the Heathrow Terminal 5 case. As a leader, I worked with peers who had different work schedules, communication preferences, and project management experience levels. Our goal was to function as a cohesive, high-performing team that could produce a stakeholder engagement strategy through using real-world tools like the Salience model and Mendelow's matrix, all while maintaining academic rigor, mutual respect, and a strong internal culture. Guided by PMI's definition of team as a collaborative, adaptive system that fosters learning and optimal contributions, I helped create a foundation that supported not just performance, but people. We formalized a team charter that emphasized psychological safety, accountability, and proactive communication. I encouraged a soft and hard deadline structure to accommodate personal obligations and model transparency by sharing my own weekly obstacles to normalize asking for help. Importantly, we rotated meeting roles and gave each other ownership of different components in the final presentation, from TSA stakeholder analysis to value proposition mapping. Despite time zone differences, varied family commitments, and personal workloads, our team completed every assignment on time, often early. Our final stakeholder engagement presentation received an A grade, and peer feedback emphasized the team's balance of professionalism and support. What made this experience distinct was that team cohesion wasn't accidental, it was designed. Each member contributed meaningfully, and we remained aligned and accountable through every phase of the project. This example demonstrated that a strong team culture, grounded in clarity, equity, and flexibility, is just as important as technical output. Next example is the Project Management 582 Drone Delivery Project. In this course, my team was responsible for designing and delivering a complete project execution plan for Montpelier's drone delivery pilot. This involved building a fully integrated approach to project scope, scheduling, stakeholder engagement, risk, acquisition, and sustainability. We operated under a rotational leadership model and worked asynchronously across time zones. Our challenge was to operate as a cohesive unit despite shifting leadership roles and tight turnaround times. We needed to demonstrate not just document creation, but an understanding of how all elements of a delivery plan must interconnect in a real-world project environment. Whether I was assigned as lead or supporting from the bottom, I remained a consistent driver of progress. I co-developed the RAM and WBS, clearly defining responsibilities and scope across the entire project. I authored the hybrid project management memorandum, aligning agile and predictive methodologies to fit project complexity and team needs. I contributed to stakeholder analysis and engagement strategy, ensuring our communication model aligned with interest, power, and influence levels. I also led development of the acquisition plan, contributed to the sustainability risk assessment, ensured all planning elements spoke to one another. I initiated hybrid check-ins and documented integration gaps to maintain cohesion. My focus was always on team clarity, alignment, and follow-through. The result was comprehensive, realistic project plan that reflected the input of every team member and earned high marks for strategy, structure, and professionalism. Despite rotating roles and asynchronous work, We maintained momentum and quality across all modules. The experience reinforced my belief in PMI's definition of team, diverse individuals working collaboratively within a shared culture to produce outcomes stronger than any individual could achieve alone. My consistent presence, whether leading or supporting, was a stabilizing force that helped turn complexity into cohesion. Last example for team is the ISEC purchasing role that I have. Considering I recently joined ISEC as a procurement agent, where I support the purchasing and logistic functions critical to project execution. While the team is skilled and deadline driven, much of the workflow is task oriented with limited cross functional collaboration between procurement, PMs, and operations. My goal is to foster stronger collaboration within the purchasing team and between departments, reflecting PMI's definition of team as a dynamic system where individuals align around shared outcomes and create a culture of mutual learning and contribution. I began observing communication patterns and documenting pain points and how information flows between purchasing and project managers. My next step include proposing a recurring check-in between procurement and project management to improve clarity on project needs and supplier constraints. I also plan to advocate for shared workspace or update system and ComSets where updates can be tracked in real time. Additionally, I'm encouraging informal dialogue with warehouse and logistics teams to build rapport and better understanding the full delivery pipeline. My vision is to help create a more cohesive, responsive team culture, one where procurement is not just executing orders, but actively contributing to project delivery strategy. By aligning roles more closely and opening up feedback loops, I believe we can reduce work and rework, improve supply relationships, and strengthen trust between departments. For me, this is what it means to build a project team, not by title, but by shared intent and synchronized execution. Integration of team and stewardship. For me, the principle of team is inseparable from stewardship because creating an environment where individuals can thrive is a core form of responsibility. In each of my team experiences, from leading the white team in Project Management 533 to collaborating across roles in Project Management 582 and Project Management 512, I view team cohesion not just as a means to an end, but as something to be actively protected and nurtured. Stewardship shows up in how I structured workloads to respect personal time and how I ensured all voices were included regardless of leadership role, and in how I help maintain quality through consistency and support. In this way, I practice stewardship not only of project resources, but of the people and relationships that drive project success. Good team leadership is good stewardship because the people are the project. With that said, stewardship, the PMI definition is stewards act responsibly to carry out activities with integrity, care, and trustworthiness while maintaining compliance with internal and external guidelines. They demonstrate a broad commitment to financial, social, and environmental impacts of the project they support. Stewardship encompasses responsibilities within and external to the organizations. Stewardship includes integrity, care, trustworthiness, and compliance. A holistic view of stewardship considers financial, social, technical, and sustainable environmental awareness. I used to think stewardship as simply making responsible choices with budgets and timelines. PMI's definition reminded me that it's broader. It's about trust, integrity, and long-term responsibility. I updated my definition to reflect its emphasis on protecting people, values, and future impact. To showcase uh, this development and action with Project Management 503, Project Green Floor. In this course, I led a strategic assessment and planning effort for the Green Floor Initiative, a sustainability transformation project for Elite Floor Home and Design in partnership with Eco Florist Solutions, both fictional companies. The flooring industry, as the analysis revealed, faced serious issues around unsustainable sourcing, environmental degradation, and unethical labor practices. The challenge was to design a supply chain transformation that was not only financially viable, but rooted in long-term ethical stewardship and environmental responsibility. My primary responsibility was to assess the environmental, social, and economic implications of flooring options and produce a comprehensive sustainability management plan and P5 impact analysis. This included leading supplier sustainability assessments, proposing procurement strategy reforms, and aligning the entire project vision with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Stewardship here meant far more than controlling costs. It meant building a future-facing, trust-centered system across the entire life cycle of product development and delivery. I approached the project by treating stewardship as both a value system and a leadership responsibility. I conducted a full life cycle assessment, LCA, of flooring materials using ISO 14040 guidelines, comparing long-term costs, environmental impact, and social consequences. I introduced multi-criteria decision-making to weigh trade-offs ethically, not just economically. I authored the Sustainability Management Plan, which defined roles, KPIs, and risk controls that embedded sustainability throughout the project. This included strategies to mitigate supplier resistance, ensure labor fairness, and implement transparent labeling, all supported by the literature from Maltzman, Carboni, and others. I also modeled the plan after Patagonia's supply chain stewardship model, emphasizing long-term social return on investment, SROI, along with profitability. The result was detailed, scalable sustainability transformation framework that went far beyond regulatory compliance. The plan prioritized not only environmental and financial metrics, but stakeholder trust, long-term resiliency, and ethical supply chain governance. It showed that stewardship is not just about safeguarding resources, it's about protecting the people, systems, and values that define a project's true legacy. The academic response confirmed that I effectively balanced ethical, operational, and systemic considerations in a way that reflects the full scope of PMI's stewardship principle. The next example is Project Management 532 Chad Cameroon Pipeline P5 impact analysis. In this course, I was tasked with assessing the sustainability, ethical risks, and stakeholder impacts of the Chad Cameroon pipeline project using the P5 impact analysis framework. The project faced global scrutiny due to its implications for indigenous populations, labor practices, environmental risk, and regional equity, all of which challenge traditional project metrics of success. My role is to conduct a multidimensional evaluation of the pipeline, its people, planet, and prosperity impacts, identify where stewardship had failed or could be enhanced, and recommended systemic interventions to improve transparency, ethics, and long-term resilience. This required applying stewardship thinking across stakeholder engagement, risk management, and procurement policy. I approached stewardship as a leadership mindset, not just compliance. I evaluated labor conditions, corruption vulnerabilities, energy transition risks, and stakeholder exclusion using the P5 impact analysis structure. I uncovered failures in equitable engagement with indigenous groups, lack of community consultation, environmental servicing risks, and ethical lapses in procurement. My recommendations included implementing anti corruption protocols and third party oversight, equitable consultation with indigenous communities and NGOs, local revenue sharing agreements, life cycle based sustainability planning using stakeholder inputs, sustainable procurement and servicing aligned with international human rights standards. I use both quantitative scoring and qualitative insights to drive home the systemic nature of the issues, emphasizing not just what was wrong, but how it could be corrected through ethical stewardship. The result revealed a dramatic improvement in impact scores across ethical behavior, community engagement, and environmental strategy after my proposed changes. More importantly, this exercise deepened my understanding of stewardship as a moral responsibility to defend the dignity of people, ecosystems, and future generations. This wasn't about optimizing for ROI. It was about doing the right thing through proactive, principle-based project management. The project reinforced that stewardship is about applying foresight, transparency, and care, especially in high-risk, politically sensitive projects. Next example is this Project Management 532 Sepal Corrupt Gas case. In Project Management 532, I was assigned to evaluate the Shell ENP Ireland Limited Corrupt Gas Project, Sepal. which had become a symbol of stakeholder mismanagement, environmental controversy, and corporate mistrust. The project had stalled due to widespread public backlash, including from local landowners, environmental activists, and NGOs, triggered by the SEPL's dismissive approach to stakeholder voices and environmental concerns. My role was to create a detailed stakeholder engagement plan that reflected sustainable project stewardship, specifically one that promoted transparency, inclusion, and ethical long-term engagement with all impacted groups. I had to reimagine Seppel's approach, aligning it with sustainable development frameworks and PMI's definition of stewardship, responsible and ethical care for resources, outcomes, and relationships across the full life cycle of the project. I developed a stakeholder plan grounded in both sustainability theory and practical engagement strategies. Using models from Royer, Sylvius and Shipper, and Mitchell, I conducted a full stakeholder salience analysis, interest power mapping, and created tailored strategies for each group, from allies like regulators and employees to opponents like environmental NGOs and landowners. For the local community, I recommended monthly town halls, open feedback portals, and a grievance escalation system to reestablish trust. For the Irish government, I proposed a compliance and feedback loop tied to regulatory KPIs. Importantly, I emphasized transparency and participatory oversight, suggesting that SEPL extend advisory roles to environmental groups as a sign of good faith and collaborative responsibility. The engagement plan I developed represented a complete cultural shift from traditional risk averse corporate strategy to one that modeled responsible stewardship. The academic response noted how my plan elevated marginalized voices while still aligning with project goals and regulatory frameworks. It demonstrated the sustainable project delivery isn't just about balancing technical scope, it's about managing trust, power, and ethics. This project deepened my conviction that stewardship requires leaders to prioritize people and principles, not just progress, especially in complex, politically sensitive environments. My last example is my aspiration for ISAC. At ISAC, I'm managing a procurement cycle involving a vendor with inconsistent performance. While their pricing was competitive, they had a pattern of incomplete shipments and communication lapses that affected site coordination and installer productivity. I had to decide whether to continue using the vendor for a critical upcoming PO or recommend a shift to a higher cost vendor known for reliability. This wasn't just about cost decision, it was a stewardship call about long-term trust and delivering of integrity. I reviewed delivery data, escalation emails, and internal feedback. I then met with the PM and warehouse lead to align on the risk profile based on past performance and stakeholder feedback. I drafted a recommendation memo for vendor transition detailing the downstream impact of failure to perform scenarios. The team agreed and we shifted vendors. The new supplier delivered early and site coordination ran smoothly. This experience reinforced that stewardship isn't just budget protection, it's responsibility to the people who rely on you. Sometimes the most ethical, future-proof choice is the one that costs more upfront, but prevents systemic breakdowns down the line. The integration between stewardship and adaptability and resiliency. Stewardship and adaptability are deeply intertwined. In my ISAC vendor decision, the choice to transition away from a cheaper but unreliable supplier wasn't just about ethics. It was about preparing the project system to absorb future shocks. By prioritizing long-term reliability and stakeholder confidence, I reduced the chance of last-minute disruptions and positioned the team to respond more flexibly under pressure. Stewardship at its core is about protecting the resilience of the system, investing in people, partnerships, and processes that will stand up to change, not collapse under it. Adaptability becomes easier when stewardship has already laid the foundation of trust, foresight, and structural readiness. In this way, stewardship is the soil where resiliency grows. Principle 4, adaptability and resiliency. The PMI definition is build adaptability and resiliency into the organizations and project teams' approaches to help the project accommodate change, recover from setbacks, and advance the work of the project. Adaptability is the ability to respond to changing conditions. Resiliency is the ability to absorb impacts and to recover quickly from a setback or failure. A focus on outcomes rather than outputs facilitates adaptability. I used to think of adaptability and resiliency as soft skills, traits you develop over time rather than deliberate strategies. But PMI's framing showed me that these are core project capabilities, not afterthoughts. I now view adaptability as a mindset of responsiveness and resiliency as the structural discipline that allows a team to pivot from without collapsing. Together, they empower me to lead with flexibility, absorb disruptions without losing momentum, and help my team stay aligned even when conditions change. Adaptability and resiliency aren't about merely enduring change, they're about evolving it without compromising value, trust, or integrity. To showcase this, as a solo leadership, um, or having the solo leadership role in the Project Management 533 White Team, I served as the sole team leader for the White Team, managing a stakeholder engagement project across a fully remote team spanning California, Arizona, and Texas. We faced recurring challenges, time zone mismatches, inconsistent communication rhythms, different learning and work styles, and varying levels of commitment. As the project intensified, I found myself contributing the majority of structural content, coordinating nearly all communication, realigning expectations weekly, yet not always receiving the same level of initiative in return. My task was to guide the team toward high quality deliverables while sustaining a respectful, functional environment. But my deeper task was personal. I had to remain calm, supportive, and clear headed, even when I felt overwhelmed or undersupported. This experience became a test not just of leadership, but of emotional resiliency and adaptive professionalism. I built a flexible team schedule and inserted buffer zones into our workflow so that others could contribute even if I had to initiate or scaffold the work. I adapted my communication tone even when team engagement dipped. I kept messages upbeat, constructive, and never accusatory. I reframed my own mindset instead of letting frustration take over. I leaned into the empathy, patience, and big picture thinking that good leadership requires. When I felt burned out, I set small boundaries, time blocking, step away moments, but I never disengaged. I remind myself daily that my example was setting the tone for everyone else. So composure and clarity mattered more than credit or control. I also made space for teammates to feel comfortable contributing, even late in the process, choosing to meet people where they were instead of where I wish they were. Despite uneven participation, we submitted every deliverable on time and earned top marks for our final presentation. More importantly, we preserved a sense of psychological safety and shared success. I emerged from the experience not just more strategic, but more emotionally disciplined. I learned that adaptability means adjusting your expectations to meet others where they are, and resiliency means showing up consistently without resentment, even when the load feels heavier on your shoulders. Leadership isn't about how much you carry, it's about how steadily you carry it. Next example is Project Management 582 Turquoise Team, Rotational Leadership and Shared Resilience. In this, our team developed the Montpelier Drone Delivery Pilot Plan. Through our team, though our team used a rotational leadership model, I frequently stepped up to lead coordination, clarify assignment expectations, and ensure deliverable cohesion, particularly during development of complex components like the WBS, RAM acquisition plan, and sustainability analysis. My ongoing task was to help the team navigate ambiguity and shifting expectations while maintaining psychological safety, clarity, and deliverable quality. I also had to manage internal team pressures, such as moments where the temptation was to chase grades rather than engage deeply with the learning experience. I initiated multiple working sessions that offered structural tools, such as draft outlines, decision matrices, to support clear vision of labor. I adapted how I participated, taking a step back when others led and stepping in when clarity or structure was lacking. When teammates focused narrowly on hitting a certain number of risks in the RAID log or WBS task lines, I remind the group that the goal wasn't to meet an arbitrary number, but to reflect our actual project logic and priorities. I encouraged us to work toward a realistic and stakeholder informed plan rather than one that looked perfect on paper but lacked context. When friction arose and our momentum dipped, I remained calm and focused on positive redirection, embodying both emotional and professional resilience. We delivered a highly integrated real-world ready plan. Beyond the content, I was proud of the way we trusted each other, adapted our efforts, and leaned into the iterative process. I internalized that adaptability is not just about reacting to change, it's about shaping your team's response. And resilience is not just about finishing strong, but leading with purpose even when motivation or clarity wavers. My hope with ISEC is that every day at ISEC I encounter shifting conditions, vendor lead times change, job site schedules adjust, detailer revisions come in late, and the PMs I support are constantly reprioritizing deliveries. These fluid demands require more than organization. They demand resiliency and pressure and adaptability in planning. My task is to remain calm under pressure, protect project delivery, and respond quickly without compromising process, integrity, or stakeholder trust. I've developed a personal system to build adaptability into my workflow. I track lead time buffers, maintain direct lines with our top vendors, and keep a running list of contingency suppliers. I flag every high-risk PO with context-specific notes and proactively notify PMs when I foresee timeline friction. I also use early morning check-ins to resync with warehouse staff and clarify staging constraints. When manufacturer delayed a critical order, I sourced an alternative spec within 24 hours by coordinating with the detailer, vendor, and PM simultaneously, preserving the schedule without panic. My team has come to rely on me as a stabilizing force. I've earned trust by staying composed and action oriented during the disruptions. PMI helped me reframe these moments not just as setbacks, but as opportunities to lead with resilience and flexibility. Even every day at ISEC teaches me the adaptability isn't just about changing course, it's about holding the mission steady through the storm. Integration of leadership's teams, stewardship, adaptability, and resiliency. Adaptability and resiliency are the connective tissue of Cluster One, while leadership, team, and stewardship set the tone for ethical behavior, collaboration, and responsible decision making. It's adaptability and resiliency that make these principles durable in practice. The ability challenge, to respond to challenges with exposure, flexibility, and purpose ensures that a leader can sustain a team culture and deliver long-term value even when the environment changes rapidly. From my experiences in project management 533 and project management 582 and now at ISEC, I've learned that strong leadership or a well-designed process means little without the resilience to navigate miscommunication, timeline shifts, or competing priorities. Emotional discipline, contextual awareness, and process flexibility allow all other principles to function under stress. This principle also serves as a natural bridge into Cluster 2. Without adaptability, you can't tailor approaches to meet stakeholder needs or preserve quality under shifting conditions. And it anchors the entry into Cluster 3, where projects face uncertainty, complexity, and constant change. Resilient leaders absorb disruption, respond constructively, adapt the teams and iterate rather than fracture. This way, adaptability and resiliency transform principles into practices that endure, making the values of leadership, team cohesion, and stewardship truly sustainable. Thank you for joining me in exploring the foundational principles of leadership, team stewardship, and adaptability and resiliency. These are not just competencies, they are the ethical anchors of sustainable project success. As I continue developing towards project management roles, these principles will guide how I lead teams, empower collaboration, and protect long-term project value. Up next, I'll dive deeper into how stewardship, quality, value, and tailoring is critical in its role to ensuring that the projects we manage today continue to serve organizations, stakeholders, and communities in my next presentation. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back to the next part of my capstone series, the structure to synergy, evolving into a values-driven PM generalist. In this segment, I'll focus on a crucial cluster of project management principles, stakeholder engagement, value, quality, and tailoring. Building on the leadership and stewardship foundations from Cluster 1, this cluster moves us outward into how we align with stakeholder needs, deliver measurable value, protect quality, and adapt our approach to project environments. My philosophy of project management sees success not simply in completing tasks, but in delivering outcomes that matter, outcomes that reflect stakeholder priorities, uphold standards of excellence, and are tailored to fit complex, dynamic conditions. As I continue developing at ISAC and preparing to transition into project management, mastering these principles ensures I can drive projects that create lasting impact, not just short-term results. Integration. These principles don't exist in silos. Stakeholders define what matters. Value is the benefit we deliver. Quality is how we ensure those benefits meet expectations. Tailoring is how we adapt tools to ensure alignment across all three. This cluster underscores why project management is ultimately about people, not just tools. So with our first exam principle, stakeholders, the PMI defines stakeholders as engage stakeholders proactively and to the degree needed to contribute to project success and customer satisfaction. Stakeholders influence projects, performance, and outcomes. Project teams serve as other stakeholders by engaging with them. Stakeholder engagement proactively advances value delivery. I originally thought stakeholder management meant communicating status updates and gathering requirements. After reviewing PMI's definition, I now understand that stakeholders are dynamic participants with varying influence and expectations, and successful projects require strategic engagement throughout. My first example here is in Project Management 532, I was tasked with evaluating the stakeholder dynamics in the controversial Corrib gas project in Ireland, led by Shell EMP Ireland. The project faced strong opposition from local communities, landowners, environmental activists, and the media due to environmental concerns and poor transparency. Seppel's failure to engage stakeholders meaningfully had become a central reason for delays, protests, and reputational damage. My assignment was to conduct a full-scale stakeholder identification and engagement analysis and develop a detailed stakeholder engagement plan that addressed diverse perspectives, influence levels, and conflicts. This went beyond listing contacts or sending updates. I needed to create tailored strategies that fostered dialogue, mitigated opposition, and supported long-term trust and project resilience. I began with a stakeholder mapping process with the state salience model and interest power matrix, which allowed me to categorize stakeholders based on legitimacy, urgency, and influence. Identify the unique needs of each group, such as environmental NGOs, local owners, government regulators, and Seppel's internal employees, and then craft engagement approaches accordingly. For the local community, I proposed monthly town halls, real-time feedback portals, and open newsletters. For NGOs, I recommended collaborative oversight, roles, and transparent environmental reporting. For the government, I included formal quarterly compliance reports and biannual consultation sessions. Internally, I added anonymous feedback tools for Seppel employees and contractors to voice concern over or offer ideas. The stakeholder plan was grounded in literature from Silvius and Schipper, Eskerud and Human, and Royer, aligning with sustainable stakeholder engagement and project health frameworks. The resulting plan provided Seppel with structured, strategic, and ethically grounded roadmap for rebuilding stakeholder trust. The framework transformed Seppel's approach from reactive communication to proactive, values-driven engagement, emphasizing collaboration, accountability, and shared ownership. It illustrated that managing stakeholders means more than satisfying checkboxes. It means that recognizing their power, meeting them on their terms, and integrating their perspectives into the project's evolution. This case reshaped my understanding of stakeholder management as a dynamic leadership competency essential to any project's legitimacy and sustainability. The next example, as part of the Project Management 533 White Team, I conducted a stakeholder analysis for the Heathrow Terminal 5 project, where passengers were a key stakeholder group. The scale of this infrastructure project meant that passenger satisfaction and usability would determine how much of the long-term success, yet passengers had no direct control over implementation, making their needs easy to overlook in favor of technical deliverables. My objective was to use structured stakeholder analysis tools to assess the passenger's role, influence, and engagement needs, then build a strategy to keep them informed, supported, and heard throughout the project lifecycle. I needed to show that passengers were more than end users. They were dynamic stakeholders whose satisfaction, feedback, and experience were essential to project value. I applied a multi-tool analysis using Salience model, Mendelow's power interest grid, the engagement assessment matrix, the stakeholder map, and stakeholder triage. Using the Salience model, I classified passengers as definitive stakeholders possessing high urgency, legitimacy, and indirect power through public perception and regulatory influence. In the power interest grid, I placed them in the manage closely quadrant, highlighting their need to proactive engagement despite their lack of decision-making authority. Through the engagement assessment matrix, I proposed a shift from passive neutral involvement towards supportive engagement by deploying clear communication strategies, public experience walkthroughs, and feedback mechanisms during implementation. I framed this not as a customer service, but as ethical stakeholder engagement, respecting the passenger's lived experience and aligning project delivery with their needs. Finally, I recommended continuous monitoring of public sentiment and tailored updates as part of the long-term stakeholder strategy. The resulting strategy demonstrated that passengers were not just the recipients of project outcomes, they were participants in its success. My analysis reframed how the project team viewed passive stakeholders and emphasized that ignoring those with urgency and legitimacy, even if they lack formal power, undermines sustainability and trust. This example advanced my understanding of stakeholder engagement from reactive to proactive, showing that good project management doesn't just communicate, it listens strategically and builds stakeholder buy-in from the ground up. In this example, in Project Management 582, my team and I were responsible for developing the stakeholder strategy and communications plan for Montpelier's drone delivery pilot, a project with a complex network of internal stakeholders, third-party vendors, regulators, and end users, which are customers and pharmacy managers. Ensuring that stakeholder alignment and compliance was critical due to the project's technical scope, regulatory exposure, and operational sensitivity. My role was to lead the creation of a comprehensive stakeholder engagement plan and a communications management matrix that would clearly map stakeholder needs, categorize their influence and expectations, and develop delivery methods tailored to their roles in the project lifecycle. I led the identification and categorization of over 20 stakeholders, ranging from internal executives, for example, VP of Operations, CIO, security leads, and third-party vendors, UAV solutions, to external stakeholders like the FAA regulators and pilot area customers. I used the power interest grid to assign each stakeholder into one of the 4 engagement categories: manage closely, keep satisfied, keep informed, monitor. I collaborated on designing a communications matrix that aligned frequency, format, and delivery method based on stakeholder role, regulatory constraints, and engagement preferences. For example, I helped develop real-time communication workflows for customers using mobile apps and CRM systems while ensuring formal compliance updates for regulators and investors met legal standards. I also introduced mitigation steps such as backup senders and secure portals for risk-sensitive data, ensuring no stakeholder was overlooked or underinformed. The result was a multi-layered engagement communications plan that strategically aligns stakeholder expectations with project milestones and risk profiles. By pairing structured analysis with tailored messaging, the project team was equipped to avoid misalignment, reduce resistance, and foster trust across a diverse range of stakeholders. This experience redefined my view of stakeholder management. It's not just about informing, it's about empowering, listening, and adapting to living ecosystems of perspectives. The success of this planning framework reinforced that projects succeed when stakeholders are treated as strategic partners, not passive recipients. Lastly, in my current role as a procurement agent for S&S Hardware, a subsidiary of ISEC, I quickly recognized that effective project execution depends on the seamless coordination of multiple stakeholder groups: ISEC project managers, S&S procurement and detailing teams, external manufacturers, warehouse staff, logistics partners, and even public-facing end users at the job site. While each group plays a critical role, current workflows often function in silos with gaps in communication, misaligned expectations, and missed opportunities for collaboration. My vision is to help a more intentional, structured stakeholder engagement strategy that treats every functional participant, whether internal team member or external vendor, as a project stakeholder. Drawing on PMI's principle, I aim to improve not only communication, but proactive alignment and value co-creation throughout the life cycle of material acquisition and delivery. I've begun by mapping the stakeholder ecosystem across a typical project. ISEC and SNS PMs who define schedules, constraints, and cost targets, detailers whose early design choices affect procurement timelines and product compatibility, procurement agents translating needs into actionable POs, manufacturers and reps who provide availability and production schedules, warehouse leads and logistics coordinators responsible for staging and job site coordination, end users and field teams who ultimately install and use the products to engage these stakeholders more strategically. I'm proposing a stakeholder pulse model, short cycle check-ins tied to project phases, use of consensus tags or notes to flag high impact updates, and development of a shared expectations map between SNS and ISEC teams. I want to integrate stakeholder analysis such as power interest mapping and engagement matrices into our onboarding and kickoff planning, treating PMs and detailers not just as collaborators, but as strategic contributors. My goal is to shift stakeholder engagement at SNS from transactional to transformational, where the procurement function doesn't just respond to others, but helps guide engagement, resolve disconnects early, and ensure that stakeholder voices are embedded in every decision. If successful, this approach could lead to fewer delays, stronger partnerships, and a more resilient project delivery system across ISEC's entire network. Integration of stakeholders and tailoring, stakeholder engagement and tailoring are inseparable in practical project environments. Every stakeholder group, whether internal or external, has distinct expectations, communication preferences, and definitions of success in both academic projects like Project Management 582's drones delivery strategy and my current role supporting SNS and ISAC. I've learned that effective engagement only happens when we tailor our tools, communication, and planning approaches to match stakeholder needs, whether it's customizing reports, formats for project managers, adjusting lead time buffers for manufacturers, or refining engagement strategies for community members as seen in the Core of Gas project. Tailoring allows stakeholder engagement to move from generic to strategic by adapting methods based on context and stakeholder characteristics. I've been able to foster alignment, reduce friction, and ensure each voice meaningfully contributes to project success. Next is tailoring. PMI defines tailoring as design the project development approach based on the context of the project, its objective, stakeholder governance, and the environment using just enough process to achieve the desired outcome while maximizing value, managing cost, and enhancing speed. Each project is unique. Project success is based on adapting to unique context of the project to determine the most appropriate methods of producing the desired outcomes. Tailoring the approach is iterative and therefore is a continuous process throughout the project. Initially, I thought that tailoring meant selecting templates. PMI's definition helped me to realize that tailoring is strategic, requires situational awareness and stakeholder empathy, and now treat it as a leadership function, not just a setup task. For my first example, in Project Management 533, our white team was tasked with developing a complete stakeholder engagement strategy for the Heathrow Terminal 5 project. The challenge was to meet the needs of a diverse and highly impacted set of stakeholders, from regulatory bodies and airport staff to passengers, community members, and media, each with different levels of power, interest, and communication preferences. My responsibility was to help lead the development um, of our stakeholder analysis, value proposition, communication strategy, and final presentation. To do this effectively, we had to tailor our tools, language, and engagement methods based on stakeholder group, not apply a universal mode of communication template. I led and contributed to several ways for we tailored our stakeholder engagement plan. We customized stakeholder identification by using a blended model, combining the salience model, Mendelow's power interest matrix, and engagement assessment matrix to better visualize influence and communication needs. For passengers, I propose real-time app-based updates, recognizing their need for immediate clear communication without being directly involved in planning. For TSA and airline staff, we designed internal briefings, role-specific walkthroughs, and change impact sessions. We wrote our value propositions using statements per group, economic security for executives, quality of life for local residents, and efficiency for TSA. Our communications matrix reflected frequency channel and accountability per group, ensuring each plan component was intentionally aligned. We adapted PMI frameworks to suit the stakeholder density and operational nature of Heathrow T5, reinforcing that tailoring wasn't about abandoning standards, but about flexing them to fit context. The engagement strategy we presented was praised for its depth, realism, and strategic adaptability. Tailoring allowed us to demonstrate not only tool mastery, but situational leadership, choosing the right models and messages for the right audience at the time. This experience helped solidify my understanding of tailoring as a continuous intentional process, not a one-time setup step. It taught me how project success depends on our ability to design solutions that reflect the complexity and diversity of people involved. Next example is the Montpelier Pharmacy partnered with UAV Solutions to test a drone delivery service with Project Management 582. This initiative involved multiple internal departments, third-party vendors, and regulatory agencies, and demanded balance between formal planning and agile adaptation. The complexity, regulation, and stakeholder diversity meant a one-size-fits-all approach wouldn't work. Our team was tasked with building a full end-to-end project plan. I was responsible for helping lead the creation and coordination of several critical components, including the PM approach, stakeholder analysis, RAM WBS, P5 impact analysis, and the communication strategies. How we tailored was that we used a hybrid PM approach in our memorandum. We evaluated predictive versus agile versus hybrid, decided on a hybrid approach based on fixed compliance goals, predictive and iterative development, agile. This was justified in a formally submitted memorandum that addressed compliance, technical flexibility, and stakeholder feedback cycles. Next, stakeholder analysis and engagement strategy were identified and categorized 25 plus stakeholders using a power interest grid, tailored communications and engagement levels based on their category, customized the communication delivery methods, real-time SMS for customers, secure portal for legal teams, and dashboards for tech stakeholders. With the WBS and RAM development, we tailored our WBS not just by deliverables, but aligned it with actual reporting and compliance structures. The RAM assigned cross-functional roles spanning pharmacy ops, drone ops, IT security, and legal, reflecting the layered responsibility matrix needed for a public-facing regulated pilot project. Sustainability and risk tailoring, P5 analysis and acquisition plan. We ran a P5 impact analysis to integrate social and environmental sustainability. Risks like forced overtime and vendor transparency were proactively mitigated through training and policy recommendations. The acquisition plan also reflected ethical procurement tailoring. High-level Gantt and network diagram, we tailored our timeline to align with compliance check-ins, public rollout dates, and tech sprints. The network diagram highlighted cross-departmental dependencies, which shaped our implementation strategy. Result, tailoring enabled our team to maintain regulatory compliance, ensure technical readiness, and build public trust, all while maintaining all while remaining adaptable. Our final plan was praised for being realistic, comprehensive, and stakeholder focused. With the ISEC, I work at working as a procurement agent supporting S&S Hardware subsidiary that operates under ISEC's broader project delivery framework. ISEC project managers rely on a tightly integrated process involving detailers, purchasing, manufacturing reps, warehouse teams, logistic coordinators, and in many cases, public-facing construction stakeholders. The challenge is that many of those roles operate in silos using communication methods and rhythms that don't always align, putting project outcomes at risk. My aim is to begin tailoring my procurement workflow and communication methods to better reflect the functional and stakeholder differences across teams. My goal isn't just to place POs, but to act as a strategic bridge that ensures expectations, timelines, and constraints are visible and synchronized between all key players. I started by mapping the stakeholder ecosystem across a typical purchasing cycle. I plan to tailor my approach through the following. For ISEC PMs, I intend to adjust my update cadence and formatting to match their project timelines using clear delivery flags and consents and summary briefs for weekly syncs. With detailers, I'm planning earlier engagement, asking about long lead materials before final drawings to reduce scope drift later. For manufacturers, I'll adapt how I build PO language, incorporating tailored lead times, warnings, and delivery staging notes directly into orders to support warehouse planning. Internally, I'll suggest refining our comp sense use with standardized tags and notes that reflect stakeholder specific needs. For example, split shipment, JIT staging, hold, just-in-time staging, hold for site call, making the system work smarter. I'm also initially initiating formal relationships building with warehouse leads and logistic coordinators to better understand when flexibility is needed and when rigidity protects project flow. While still early in execution, this tailored approach is already creating more clarity and less friction in how I support PMs and manage expectations upstream. My long-term vision is for our procurement process to be less transactional, more contextual, one where communication, task sequencing, and stakeholder priorities are baked into every purchasing decision. Tailoring in this environment means adapting how I operate based on who's involved, what stage we're in, and what constraints need to be surfaced, not just following a static checklist. Tailor and quality are intrinsically linked because delivering quality isn't just about meeting standards, it's about applying the right standards in the right way. In both Project Management 533's Heathrow project and Project Management 582's Drone Delivery Plan, tailoring allowed my team to adapt frameworks and communication tools to fit the needs of stakeholders, timelines, and deliverable types. That intentional customization elevated the quality of our work not only by preventing errors or misalignment, but by ensuring our outputs were meaningful, relevant, and usable by the audience they serve. At ISEC, this relationship is even more apparent, tailoring how I format updates for project managers, clarify PO language for manufacturers, or sync delivery details with warehouse leads doesn't just improve process efficiency, it ensures each stakeholder receives the right level of quality they need to fulfill their role. Tailoring then is the foundation for quality because projects aren't built in ideal conditions, they're built in real ones. With quality, the PMI defines it as maintain a focus on quality that produces deliverables that meet project objectives and align to the needs, uses, and acceptance requirements set forth by relevant stakeholders. Project quality entails satisfying stakeholders' expectations and fulfilling project and product requirements. Quality focuses on meeting acceptance criteria for deliverables. Project quality entails ensuring project processes are appropriate and as effective as possible. I used to associate quality with inspection and final deliverables. PMI's definition helped me realize that quality begins with clear requirements and must be embedded into every phase of the project. I now see it as a living commitment to excellence. First example, in Project Management 512, I served as a lead on a project case study proposing a global wellness program for Wayland-Yutani Corporation, a culturally diverse multi-regional organization with a unique workforce needs ranging from performers to corporate staff. The prior wellness initiative had failed due to unclear quality standards, inconsistent application across regions, and limited stakeholder feedback loops. My task was to develop a complete project approach that prioritized quality from inception to implementation, ensuring that consistent performance, stakeholder satisfaction, and long-term program integrity. I needed to define what quality would mean in this context and integrate it into resource planning, communication strategies, and feedback systems. I designed the program plan with quality embedded throughout. I defined success criteria and performance indicators for wellness outcomes across cultural lines, ensuring both a clinical effectiveness and a personal resonance. I introduced proactive quality assurance tools such as affinity diagrams and cause and effect diagrams to visualize feedback data and identify root causes of program breakdowns early. I implemented a feedback loop structure, regular participant surveys, focus groups, and wellness engagement metrics to ensure that how well the program was being received and where course corrections were needed. I also tailored quality strategies for localization, allowing each region to adapt messaging and delivery methods while still meeting overarching quality goals, ensuring cultural sensitivity and consistency, both of which are critical to stakeholder trust. Finally, I proposed routine quality audits and reviews, not only for compliance, but to encourage continuous improvement tied to stakeholder experience. The case was praised for embedding quality as an iterative, stakeholder-centered strategy rather than a final evaluation step. Through this project, I demonstrated that quality is not static. It must be evolved alongside the project, shaped by ongoing input and grounded in measurable standards. It reinforced my belief that quality starts with clear stakeholder requirements and is carried forward through transparency, accountability, and adaptive leadership. With my next example in Project Management 531, I analyzed the failed integration of a new payment method by a high-performing cross-functional project team. Despite prior collaboration history, the project was derailed by poor leadership, unrealistic timelines, and most critically, a lack of embedded quality assurance. Although the project launched, it quickly became clear that the product was riddled with bugs and post-launch maintenance costs directly tied to the absence of structured quality plan. My objective was to conduct a root cause analysis of the breakdown and identify specific areas where quality planning and assurance mechanisms could have prevented the failure. I needed to translate academic leadership and quality management theory into practical preventative measures. I identified several key quality failures. No quality control timeline or QA resource planning was allocated due to unrealistic constraints. The MVP was not revised to align with the compressed timeline, forcing developers to cut corners and skip adequate testing cycles. Feedback was accepted from stakeholders without data validation or structured review gates, leading to scope creep and rework without stability checks. I applied concepts from Kozlowski and Agile QA principles to outline corrective actions, establishing success criteria tied to post-launch performance, not just UAT completion, including a structured sprints with unit testing and regression testing baked into a development plan, instituting a QA feedback gate before stakeholder review to reduce conflicting revisions. I framed this in my case analysis as a failure in both procedural and technical quality leadership, not just a team issue, but a system level breakdown. My analysis clarified how treating quality as an afterthought leads to technical doubt, stakeholder dissatisfaction, and rework that undermines delivery momentum. This case became a turning point in my philosophy. Quality isn't something you test at the end, it's something you build with every step. It affirmed that defining quality early, aligning it with stakeholder needs, and ensuring resources are assigned to protect it are central to project success. Lastly, at ISEC, I support construction project managers by procuring architectural frames, doors, and hardware for large-scale commercial and government buildings. The complexity and visibility of these projects means that every product must meet exact specifications, timelines, and sequencing requirements. If even a single component is wrong, late, or undocumented, it can delay inspections, stall job site progress, and threaten ISEC's contractual obligations. My goal is to embed quality thinking into every procurement action, not just ensuring the parts are correct, but that the entire process from PO to delivery reflects clear requirements, traceability, accountability, and proactive coordination. I want to evolve procurement from fulfillment role into a quality partner supporting project delivery. I've started implementing the following to elevate quality. When issuing purchase orders, I double verify specifications against project submittals and vendor catalog data to catch mismatches before release. I work closely with detailers to clarify scope changes early rather than reactively, minimizing revision cycles and ensuring accuracy. For parts with tight tolerances or custom builds, I flag the PO with manufacturer notes and add internal staging reminders to support field sequencing. I track vendor reliability and response trends to inform better sourcing decisions, prioritizing those with accurate fulfillment histories. I collaborate with the warehouse and the logistics teams to create pre-checks before shipment, part labels, packaging integrity, and delivery prep based on job site readiness. I'm developing a personal checklist system that mirrors a QA QC handoff model, ensuring that what leaves the warehouse is was intended on paper. My efforts are already reducing part discrepancies and minimizing last-minute job site corrections. The PMs I support are gaining confidence that materials will arrive complete, on time, and install ready. Over time, my goal is to champion a culture of quality ownership across the procurement chain, where every handoff reflects excellence. In this context, quality is not just about checking boxes, it's about protecting project momentum, contractor reputation, and ultimately the success of a multi-million-dollar construction contracts. The integration of quality and value are inherently linked because you can't deliver meaningful value without ensuring the quality of both processes and outcomes. Quality provides the structure, discipline, and standards that ensure the or service is fit for purpose. Value ensures it actually matters to stakeholders. In Project Management 512's Global Wellness Program, value was tied to long-term employee health, but it was quality planning, feedback loops, metrics, and cultural adaptability that made it sustainable. In Project Management 531's Team for Jesus case, the lack of quality control led to costly rework and stakeholder disappointment, directly undermining perceived value. At ISEC, I've seen how missing or incorrect hardware can stall inspections, delay occupancy, and erode client trust, no matter how well the rest of the job was managed. Delivering value in construction means materials are accurate, timely, and install ready, and that's only possible when quality is embedded at every phase. Ultimately, quality safeguards value, ensuring that delivered not only meets expectations, but exceeds them in ways that resonate with stakeholders long after the project ends. Lastly, value is defined as follows by PMI: continually evaluate and adjust project alignment to business objectives and intended benefits and value. Value is the ultimate indicator of project success. Value can be realized throughout the project, at the end of the project, or after the project is complete. Value and the benefits that contribute to value can be defined in quantitative and or qualitative terms. A focus on outcomes allows project teams to support the intended benefits that lead to value creation. Project teams evaluate progress and adapt to maximize the expected value. I once believed value was tied mostly to the deliverables and budget compliance. PMI's definition helped me realize that value is dynamic and subjective. I now recognize value as something created through outcomes and matter to the people involved. First example, in Project Management 533, my white team was tasked with developing a stakeholder value proposition for the Heathrow Terminal 5 case study. I focused on passengers, critical stakeholders, groups who, despite having limited project power, have a high emotional and reputational impact on the project's long-term success. In most projects I had encountered before, value was synonymous with budget efficiency or deliverable completion. This assignment challenged me to explore multidimensional value through a stakeholder-centric lens. My objective was to define and articulate what value means from the passenger's perspective and align it with the T5's project's objectives. I needed to demonstrate that value isn't just something delivered at the end, it's created and exchanged throughout the project's life cycle and can differ significantly by stakeholder group. I drew upon the five value dimensions: perceived, planned, investment, project, and exchange value outlined in our literature and adapted them to the context of airport passenger experience. Perceived value was addressed through the lens of customer experience, security, convenience, and transparency were critical for passengers. Planned value, planned and investment value include resource allocation toward infrastructure like check-ins, kiosks, baggage automation, and terminal amenities. Project value came through the actual execution of those systems and services seen and felt in reduced wait times and efficient navigation. Exchange value was where I tied everything together: passenger satisfaction directly fed back into brand loyalty, operational efficiency, and long-term stakeholder goodwill. I used this structure to show that passenger engagement wasn't a soft metric. It was central to both the success of the project and the sustainability of the airport ecosystem. I also embedded risk mitigation in my value strategy, recognizing that neglecting these dimensions could erode public trust and lead to a reputational fallout. The write-up was well received by both my teammates and our instructor, particularly for its depth of stakeholder empathy and strategic framing of value as dynamic. More importantly, this exercise shifted my view of value creation. I no longer treat it as an output, but as a continuously exchanged asset, one that emerges from alignment, communication, and a commitment to what truly matters to the people involved. Next is the Project Management 582. My team and I developed a full-scale project plan for Montpelier Pharmacy's drone delivery project. The initiative sought to explore the viability of a last-mile drone delivery for prescriptions, a novel and highly visible initiative involving complex compliance, stakeholder trust, public exposure, and new technology integration. The success of the project was not just tied to operational execution, it depended on whether it delivered meaningful value to internal and external stakeholders. My role was to co-lead the development of the project's management approach, stakeholder plans, sustainability analysis, communications framework, and procurement strategy. The challenge was ensuring that every element of the plan aligned with stakeholder expectations and Montpelier's strategic objectives while minimizing the perceived delivered and lasting value of the initiative. I applied a value-focused lens to every stage of planning. In our stakeholder analysis, we mapped key groups, executives, pharmacists, and end users, regulators, and assessed what value meant for each. For executives, it was brand differentiation and risk containment. For customers, it was reliability, safety, and service speed. In our communications matrix, we tailored engagement methods based on what stakeholders needed to feel heard and empowered, not just informed. In the project management approach memorandum, we proposed a hybrid delivery model, predictive structure to meet compliance goals, and agile cycles to build iterative improvements, thus balancing stability with flexibility and ensuring long-term value capture. Through our P5 sustainability impact analysis, we expanded the concept of value beyond financial ROI to include community benefit, environmental stewardship, and employee well-being. In the acquisition and at WS planning, I worked to ensure vendor criteria, procurement pacing, and timeline sequencing were tied directly to the organization's value priorities, risk reduction, transparency, and brand perception. The final deliverable wasn't just a project plan, it was a value delivery framework that positioned Montpelier not just to complete a pilot, but to scale a program that delivers stakeholder aligned outcomes. My understanding of value evolved from a focus on budget adherence and efficiency to one of multidimensional alignment, where the worth of a project is judged by how well it meets the needs, aspirations, and expectations of those it touches. This project showed me that the value in both the reason for the project and the result of doing it right. Lastly, as a procurement agent for S&S Hardware supporting ISEC construction projects, I'm responsible for acquiring doors, frames, and hardware for government and commercial buildings. These projects demand precision, security, and compliance. Any failure to deliver accurate materials can delay inspections, derail installation, or damage relationships with high-stakes clients. Early on, I thought value was about buying materials as a competitive price at a competitive price and hitting deadlines. But through my coursework and experience, I've come to see that true value lies in aligning with stakeholder needs and delivering outcomes that matter to them, including predictability, quality, and transparency. My task is to generate and protect value at every step of the procurement life cycle, not just by completing transactions, but by supporting project managers, aligning with warehouse workflows, and ensuring materials meet the field's exact needs. That means delivering the right product in the right sequence with clear expectations and doing it in a way that builds trust across every stakeholder touchpoint. I began tailoring my procurement approach to optimize stakeholder value, proactively coordinate with ISEC PMs to understand why, not just what is needed, but why and when, so I can sequence POs and deliveries based on job site readiness and inspection deadlines. I embed quality control measures into my process, double checking specifications, tagging long lead time items, and flagging high risk components that may require backup sourcing or early shipment. I use my understanding of stakeholder priorities from warehouse efficiency to vendor communication style to tailor how I issue and track orders, ensuring that they serve each stakeholder value definition. Drawing on lessons from Project Management 582 and Project Management 533, I treat procurement as a value delivery system where responsiveness, accuracy, and clear expectations are just as important as cost control. This mindset shift has allowed me to better support the ISEC PMs I work with. Instead of simply pushing POs, I contribute to project momentum, risk reduction, and stakeholder confidence. My academic experience taught me to define value not only in outputs but in impact, and now in practice I build value by understanding how my actions influence outcomes far beyond my screen. At ISEC, every material I purchase carries with it the potential to make or break a schedule, stakeholder relationship, or a reputation, and value is created when those pieces arrive ready, right, and respected by everyone they touch. So cluster 2 represents the engine room of adaptive delivery, while cluster 1 establishes Well, Cluster 1 establishes purpose, ethical leadership, team alignment, and systemic awareness. It's Cluster 2, stakeholders tailoring quality and value that translates those ideals into real-world practice. These principles make strategy tangible, stakeholder needs actionable, and delivery process flexible. They also serve as a mitigation layer against the volatility of Cluster 3, which is risk, complexity, and change, which are inevitable, but how a project engages stakeholders, tailors methods, ensures quality, and delivers value determines whether it will bend or break under pressure. Stakeholder engagement prevents complexity from becoming chaos by ensuring early alignment, feedback loops, and trust, turning potential opposition to collaborative energy. Tailoring addresses head-on by adapting tools, communication, and scope control to meet shifting conditions. It transforms rigidity into responsiveness. Quality reduces the frequency and cost of errors, offering stability amid complexity and minimizing the fallout of unexpected events through embedded assurance. Value anchors the project to outcomes that matter, even if a scope shifts or timelines evolve. A clear understanding of stakeholder defined value keeps teams focused and resilient. In essence, cluster two is the translator between vision and volatility. It aligns the aspirations of cluster one with the uncertainty of cluster three, ensuring projects don't just survive but evolve with purpose. Through tailored approaches, quality discipline, and human-centered thinking, these principles allow a project manager to anticipate, adapt, and deliver what matters most, even when the landscape shifts. Thank you for joining me in exploring the principles of stakeholder engagement, value, quality, and tailoring. These principles are about more than just meeting project requirements. They're about earning stakeholder trust, delivering meaningful outcomes, protecting excellence, and adapting wisely to context. Together, they strengthen the bridge between leadership intent and operational success. Moving forward, these principles will remain central to how I design, lead, and refine project strategies, ensuring that every project I contribute to is not just completed, but completed with purpose, quality, and stakeholder alignment. Up next, I'll dive into the dynamic forces of risk, complexity, change, and systems thinking, where resilience and strategic adaptability take center stage. Thank you. Greetings, everyone, and I'm glad to see that everyone's back from to witness my next section here from structure to synergy, evolving into a values-driven PM generalist, which is risk, complexity, change, and systems thinking. So I have learned that complexity is unavoidable, risk is inevitable, change is constant, but what defines a project leader is how we make sense of it all and what systems we build to navigate it. Welcome to part four of my capstone series, where I explore the heart of project resilience, risk, complexity, change, and systems thinking. And I must mention, these principles don't operate in isolation. They are deeply interwoven, shaping how we lead under pressure, respond to uncertainty, and create outcomes that endure. Uh, with that said, discussing a little bit about my philosophy as a values-driven project generalist, I've learned that the ability to see connections, anticipate disruptions, and respond strategically is what separates reactive project support from responsible, forward-thinking leadership. Again, um, I believe that these principles don't exist in isolation. Change requires preparation and reinforcement, but it cannot be sustained without understanding the complexity that drives it. Risks must be evaluated not just as isolated threats, but as outcomes of interconnected systems. System thinking brings these elements together, ensuring I see the full picture, anticipated consequences, and make decisions that support long-term project health. Together, these principles form the backbone of responsible, adaptive, and forward-thinking project management. With that said, starting first is risk. Um, the PMI definition here is continually evaluate exposure to risk, both opportunities and threats, to maximize positive impacts and minimize negative impacts to the project and its outcomes. Individual and overall risk can impact projects. Risks can be positive opportunities or negative threats. Risks are addressed continually throughout the project. An organization's risk attitude, appetite, and threshold influence how risk is addressed. Risk responses should be appropriate for the significance of the risk, cost-effective, realistic within the project context, agreed to by relevant stakeholders. So my understanding is that I originally thought of risk as simply identifying potential problems and having backup plans in case something went wrong. After reviewing PMI's definition, I now understand that risk is a dynamic, ongoing process that includes both threats and opportunities, and it must be evaluated continuously throughout the project's life cycles. So To delve deep into this, we're going to discuss some of my examples here. The first one is from Project Management 511, um, Helicopter Utility Vendor Assessment. This assists with risk decision making. So the situation was is that I was tasked with conducting a comprehensive risk assessment for two aerial utility vendors bidding on a 1,000-mile insulator project. The evaluation required high stakes judgment. The selected vendor would directly affect the project safety, scalability, and operational resilience. The challenge was to identify not just the technical compliance, but also risk procedure, adaptability, and long-term reliability, especially in mission-critical aviation contexts. My task is to evaluate, compare both vendors' risk management systems, performance metrics, operational scalability, and cultural alignment with our safety first mandate. I needed to assess both the quantitative and the qualitative risk dimensions to inform a recommendation that balance cost, capability, and continuity. The actions I took is that I constructed a side-by-side risk matrix comparing the vendors across key domains, personnel, fleet, safety, management systems, and EMR ratings and adaptability. I evaluated not just the number of OSHA recordables and insurance ratings, but also the depth and transparency of each company's risk management philosophy, a critical indicator of proactive versus reactive culture, identified communication issues and turnover risks within company number two's operation, signaling a potential future risk blind spot that could affect coordination under stress. I assessed operational flexibility through resource scalability, evaluating how each company could respond to emerging risks, such as weather asset breakdowns, compliance delays. I grounded my recommendation in principles of adaptive risk management, favoring company number one for its dynamic communication methods, lower EMR, and comprehensive contingency planning. The result is that I provided a report to the aviation director with a robust evidence-based recommendation to proceed with company number one. The analysis highlighted not only company number one's superior operational capacity, but also its cultural alignment with proactive and ethical risk management principles. This experience sharpened my ability to analyze complex risk profiles and vendor selection and reinforced my belief that great project outcomes are built on anticipating, not reacting to failure modes. I emerged from the project as a more strategic evaluator of both human and systemic risk dynamics. My next example is the Macondo Well project from Project Management 532. Uh, the situation was that I analyzed the catastrophic failure of the Macondo Well project to assess ethical, technical, and operational shortcomings of its risk management framework. This assignment placed me in the role of a risk consultant tasked with identifying and mitigating critical risks that could prevent a similar disaster in the future. The case revealed a deeply flawed system. BP had ignored safety tests, siloed communications, and lacked viable contingency plans, all contributing to one of the worst environmental disasters in U.S. history. My task was to dissect the project's risk ecosystem, reconstruct a proactive and ethical risk management approach, and develop a revised risk register that accounted for operational, communication, environmental, legal, and safety-related vulnerabilities. The deeper challenge was to highlight how cultural, ethical, and systemic breakdowns could be mitigated through strategic foresight and risk governance. The actions I took is that I categorized 5 high-severity threats ranging from blowout preventer failure to regulatory compliance and prioritized them using a probability impact matrix. For each, I tailored mitigation strategies such as reinforcing routine BOP testing, mandating integrated stakeholder communication protocols, and advocating third-party safety audits. I developed a proactive contingency model, mapping each risk to specific response plans, risk owners, and status indicators, aligning real-world controls with project governance and best practices. Ethically, I framed the risk categories using Helvedor's systems thinking approach, ensuring risk was not only technical but morally accountable. I address communication failures head on by assigning roles and routines to ensure consistent stakeholder engagement across organizational boundaries. The result is that the risk register and analysis helped me internalize the consequences of weak foresight and reactive planning. I learned that ethical, transparent, and continuous risk management must be embedded, not bolted on to complex projects. My framework was praised for integrating practical controls with ethical reflection and strategic realism. This experience sharpened my ability to think like a risk strategist and not just a project manager, someone who anticipates threats and builds safeguards before failure ever occurs. Now, my next example is anticipatory of my position at ISAC. And as a procurement agent at ISAC, I work within a national network involving PMs, detailers, vendors, and warehouse teams, all operating on tight, shifting timelines. I routinely face risks like fluctuating lead times, missed sequence windows, spec changes, post order, or site readiness delays. With a hybrid of direct to site and warehouse stage deliveries, each project presents an evolving mix of threats and opportunities. While these risks often emerge in procurement, the impact downstream stakeholders and overall project performance. My responsibility is to continually evaluate exposure to risks, not just react to issues, but anticipate and manage both individual and systemic risks that could disrupt procurement, delivery, and installation. Drawing from my learning in project management 582, where I used the RAID log to track project uncertainty, I now aim to bring the same structured risk awareness into real world procurement coordination. My goal is to provide project momentum, positive impacts, and ensure stakeholders are informed and aligned in real time. Some of the actions that I'll be taking is adapting the RAID log mindset from Project Management 582 into my workflow by creating a simplified tracker for high risk, current issues, and known interdependencies. Track risk severity ownership, knowing which vendors or spec changes carry greater uncertainty, and proactively communicating these to PMs in their preferred format, short callouts in emails, ComSense notes, or weekly review summaries. Anticipated and address threats by flagging long lead or high revision products, maintaining secondary sourcing plans, and validating schedules against project delivery thresholds. Creating opportunity risk value by repurposing excess stock from one project to another when applicable, helping offset sourcing delays and optimize material use. Escalated risks appropriately using RAID-based logic to prioritize which issues require full PM or detailer involvement and which could be solved tactically at the procurement level. Promoted stakeholder engagement in risk by framing risk conversations around schedule impacts and solution options, improving alignment and shared accountability. And I can position myself as a risk-aware resource for the PMs I support, offering early insight into material risks so that they can adjust timelines, budgets, and coordination efforts proactively. By applying structured risk thinking inspired by RAID logs, I've improved cross-functional visibility into material risks and can earn greater trust from PMs for early coordination. My PMs can now proactively check in on potential procurement risks rather than reacting post-failure. I can help avoid costly delivery delays, vendor reorders, and coordination breakdowns by integrating risk evaluation into everyday procurement cycle. I can just more than just manage transactions. I can probably operate as a risk partner with the project team, helping mitigate threats and surface opportunities from the moment a PO is created. So with that said, integration of risk into our next principle is complexity. Risk management and complexity are deeply interconnected in project environments where uncertainty is constant and decisions have cascading effects. Early in my experience, I've approached risks as isolated issues to be flagged and managed. Through projects like the Macondo case, and the vendor risk assessment, I've learned that risk must be viewed systemically, accounting for both threats and opportunities that emerge from complex interdependencies at ISEC, where procurement, scheduling, and delivery often span multiple time zones and stakeholders. Risks are rarely singular. They compound across shifting specs, vendor capacity, and job site readiness. By integrating my understanding of complexity into how I log and escalate risks, such as using rate informed tools, I've been able to spot upstream issues, propose practical mitigation paths, and guide decisions that reduce volatility downstream. Risk isn't static, it evolves with the project's complexity. Recognizing this has helped me move from reactive coordination to proactive risk strategy, enhancing both delivery stability and team confidence. That said, moving on to change. I'm sorry, complexity. So complexity, uh, PMI has it defined as continually evaluate and navigate project complexity so that approaches and plans enable a project team to successfully navigate the project life cycle. Complexity is the result of human behavior, system interactions, uncertainty, and ambiguity. Complexity can emerge at any point during the project. Complexity can be introduced by events or conditions that affect value, scope, communication, stakeholders, risk, and technological innovation. Project teams can stay vigilant in identifying elements of complexity and use a variety of methods to reduce the amounts of impact or complexity. I originally thought of complexity as simply dealing with large projects, tight timelines, or having many moving parts. After reviewing PMI's definition, I now understand that complexity is rooted in human behavior, system interactions, uncertainty, and ambiguity, and that it can emerge at any point in the project lifecycle. It isn't defined by size alone, but by how different elements interact in unpredictable ways, impacting scope, communication, risk, and value. Complexity requires a constant evaluation and strategic navigation to keep the project aligned and moving forward. The first example I can show you on how I understand complexity is the Project Manager 533 class, the Heathrow T5 case study. In this case study, our team was tasked with analyzing stakeholder engagement in the Heathrow Terminal 5 project, a large-scale initiative involving a diverse range of internal and external stakeholders. The project environment was inherently complex, not just due to the number of stakeholders, but because of the interdependencies between operational roles, public perception, evolving technologies, and safety expectations. Each stakeholder group, TSA staffer, baggage handler, parking attendant, passenger, and the general public had distinct priorities, communication needs, and levels of influence. Our team's objective was to assess stakeholder dynamics and develop a comprehensive strategy for engagement. To do this effectively, we had to recognize and navigate the project's complexity, particularly how overlapping interests, variable levels of engagement, and competing definitions of value could affect project success. This required more than categorizing stakeholders. It required understanding the human and systemic complexities influencing each group's behavior and expectations. The actions that we took was that we applied multiple analysis tools, including the power interest grid, salience model, stakeholder triage, and engagement assessment matrix to map how complexity manifested through influence, urgency, legitimacy, and communication gaps. We identified key stakeholders whose roles intersected operational efficiency and public perceptions, particularly passengers and TSA staff, and labeled them as definitive based on their power, legitimacy, and urgency. We recognized that engagement needed to be customized based on complexity. For example, passengers required multiple digital communication channels, while baggage handlers needed targeted training and two-way feedback mechanisms. We developed tailored communication strategies, such as combining direct interpersonal channels with scalable digital tools to reduce confusion, increase trust, and streamline feedback loops across different stakeholder groups. By addressing complexity head-on, our team developed a dynamic stakeholder engagement strategy that demonstrated how to manage ambiguity, align conflicting expectations, and adapt communication to varying levels of stakeholder power and influence. This project taught me that complexity is not something to eliminate, but something to understand, map, and manage strategically. Our final presentation and deliverables reflected that an approach that balanced structure with flexibility, ensuring that engagement both evolved alongside the project. Next example is my project management class 582 Montpelier Drone project. Um, As part of Team Turquoise, I helped develop a full project plan for Montpelier's drone delivery pilot, a fictional but highly detailed initiative combining pharmacy logistics, drone tech, and customer delivery. The project involved internal and external stakeholders across IT, legal, operations, and compliance, and required alignment between two distinct organizations, Montpelier and UAV Solutions. From system integration to FAA compliance and customer communication, we quickly recognized the project was shaped by layered complexity, with many components interdependent and evolving. Our task was to create a comprehensive plan that addressed stakeholder expectations, risk scheduling, system design, and sustainability. This required us to continually evaluate emerging complexity from unclear approval processes and evolving requirements to shifting stakeholder influence and ensuring our strategies accounted for system interactions, ambiguity, and process inefficiencies. The actions we took is that we adopted a hybrid project management approach to balance structure with flexibility, acknowledging that regulatory compliance and system customization had different process needs. Using the WBS, RAM, and P5 impact analysis, we identified critical interdependencies that could introduce complexity at any stage, particularly related to IT development, inventory logistics, and drone integration. We applied stakeholder mapping tools to understand communication gaps and areas of misalignment, adjusting deliverables and sequencing to address their varying needs. In our communication matrix and change management planning, we accounted for diverse channels, response expectations, and regulatory constraints, recognizing that miscommunication could amplify complexity across teams. We created mitigation strategies for high complexity elements, such as outlining escalation paths for late stage design changes and incorporating redundancy into vendor coordination. Our project plan successfully accounted for both the structural and behavioral sources of complexity, from inter-team dynamics to logistical uncertainty. By proactively identifying points of ambiguity and interconnection, we designed a plan that supported informed decision-making, regulatory readiness, and stakeholder coordination. This experience refined my understanding that complexity isn't something to avoid, it's something to navigate through a deliberate structure, continuous evaluation, and adaptive methods. Going into my next portion, discussing how I can apply this at ISAC. At my role at ISAC, knowing that I support national construction projects involving coordination between PMs, manufacturers, warehouse staff, job site foremen, and details, all operating on different timelines and expectations. Complexity in this environment is not occasional, it's structural. Spec revisions can arrive after orders are placed. Warehouse staging may compete with direct-to-site logistics, and project conditions shift across multiple time zones. What appears as a routine PO can rapidly evolve into a multifaceted delivery challenge. My task is to navigate this complexity by ensuring procurement actions remain aligned with evolving project conditions, minimizing miscommunication, delivery conflicts, and scheduling disruptions. To be effective, I must continually assess and adapt to systemic uncertainty, stakeholder variability, and interdependent processes flows that shape how, when, and where materials move. To take action, I can analyze PO risk in real time, flagging high variation items, unstable vendor timelines, or dependencies affected by spec changes. I can tailor communications to each stakeholder type, brief updates for PMs, detailed clarifications for manufacturers, and clear staging instructions for the warehouse, accounting for their preferred channels and urgency levels. I can track cascading changes, such as when a late detailer update affects fabrication lead times, which in turn impacts job site delivery readiness. I can adjust the logistic workflows based on shifting project demands, leveraging both direct ship and warehouse staging models depending on urgency sequencing and site limitations. I can document systemic patterns contributing to reoccurring complexities, such as certain vendors consistently missing acknowledgments, and use that insight to inform proactive planning on future projects. By staying vigilant to the sources and signals of complexity, I can help reduce misalignment across internal and external stakeholders. PMs and warehouse leads will increasingly rely on me to clarify issues before they escalate, and I'd be able to contribute to smoother project sequencing by identifying hidden interdependencies in advance. This experience can teach me that complexity isn't about chaos, it's about connection. The better I understand and manage those connections, the more stable and resilient the entire supply chain becomes. So, integration of complexity and change, understanding complexity naturally prepared me to better manage change. Complexity arises from interconnected systems, shifting conditions, and unpredictable behaviors, many of which serve as triggers for change. I learned that the more effectively I could identify and navigate complexity, the better I could anticipate the need for change before it became disruptive. By recognizing complexity early, whether it's stakeholder expectations, technical processes, or communication breakdowns, I was able to frame change not as a surprise, but as a necessary and planned response. This mindset can position me to approach change as a strategic process, one that requires preparation, adoption, and sustained reinforcement across individuals and systems. Now on to change. PMI defines change as prepare for those impacted for the adoption and sustainment of new and different behaviors and processes required for the transition from the current state to the intended future state created by the project outcomes. A structured approach to change helps individuals, groups, and the organization transition from the current state to the future desired state. Change can originate from internal influences or external sources. Enabling change can be challenging, as not all stakeholders embrace change. Attempting too much change in a short time can lead to change fatigue and/or resistance. Stakeholder engagement and motivational approaches assist in change adoption. That said, I originally viewed change management as simply communicating updates when something in the project shifted, like a new deadline, resource adjustment, or process revision. After reviewing PMI's definition, I now understand that change is an ongoing transition that requires intentional support, preparation, and reinforcement. It's not just about delivering new information, it's about preparing people to adopt new realities and behaviors. Managing change effectively means acknowledging its emotional and organizational impacts, anticipating resistance, and sustaining outcomes through continued alignment and reinforcement beyond implementation. That said, my first example is from Project Management 531, payment integration case study. In this example, my team analyzed failed digital payment integration project that originally scheduled for 16 weeks, but forced into an 8-week time frame. Despite the team being technically strong and experienced, the project was riddled with breakdowns, unrealistic deadlines, shifting requirements, and inconsistent communication. Frequent changes were introduced by stakeholders without supporting data, and the team, overwhelmed and unsupported, began working in silos. Change was constant, but the environment to absorb and adapt to that change was absent. My responsibility was to evaluate and diagnose the leadership failures that contributed to the breakdown. A core task involved analyzing how the lack of structured change management, including poor preparation, zero reinforcement, and minimal support for adoption, led to low morale, poor collaboration, and ultimately a barely functional product that incurred high post-launch maintenance costs. The actions that I took is that I assessed the change-related failures into 5 categories: time management, stakeholder input, team resilience, quality assurance, and communication flow. I connected these failures to key change Management gaps, no adjustment of MVP to fit the timeline, no support for the emotional toll of constant pivots, and no structured way to validate or reinforce changes made to code or scope. I used leadership frameworks to highlight what was missing: transparency in decision making, structured prioritization, empathy driven engagement, and clarity on what constituted success amid changing conditions. I recommended practices like change impact assessments, structured change request workflows, and open feedback channels to support adoption and reduce confusion during future change cycles. Our team produced a case study that clearly mapped how unmanaged change led to technical debt, team burnout, and stakeholder misalignment. This experience shifted my understanding of change from a logistical uh, adjustment to a human-centered process. I learned that change, especially under pressure, must be scaffolded with preparation, clear adoption strategies, and reinforced communication. Without it, even the most talented teams will struggle to adapt. Projects don't fail because of change itself; they fail because they're not supported through it. The next one is the is project management 532, the Korob and Makondo case studies, building change competency through critical failures. Uh, in here, I conducted a detailed assessment of two high-stakes energy infrastructure projects: the Korob Gas Project, led by Sepal in Ireland, and the Macondo Well Project involving BP in the Gulf of Mexico. Both projects were categorized by resistance, controversy, and risk. However, what linked their struggles was not the presence of change, but the failure to manage change properly. In both cases, project teams implemented changes, technical, environmental, and stakeholder related, without sufficient preparation, adoption support, or sustainment plans. My role was to evaluate why these changes failed to take hold and propose strategies to ensure future change efforts could be supported and sustained. I needed to assess how the absence of transparent engagement, flexible planning, and structured reinforcement led to stakeholder resistance, operational breakdowns, and reputational damage. For Carib, I analyzed Sepal's stakeholder engagement strategies and found they failed to prepare local communities and NGOs for change, resulting in protests and project delays. I proposed early consultation protocols and adaptive feedback loops. For Macondo, I evaluated BP's risk communication failures, noting that changes in drilling plans and safety protocols were not properly validated or reinforced with frontline teams. I recommended adopting a change readiness assessment and structured handoff protocols between decision makers and field teams. I emphasized the importance of reinforcement mechanisms post change, such as ongoing stakeholder satisfaction tracking and performance audits, to ensure that shifts in policy or technical direction were not just implemented, but accepted and internalized. I link these fails to the PMI principle that change can originate at any point and must be met with a strategy for adoption, not just execution. The analysis reshaped my understanding of change as human-centered discipline, not just a logistical shift. I learned that technical updates, safety mandates, and stakeholder repositioning all require structured support systems to be adopted and sustained. These case studies demonstrated that even well-intended change efforts fail when the people impacted are not prepared, consulted, or supported throughout. Change cannot be announced and assumed. It must be led, absorbed, and reinforced at every level. When it comes to ISIC, uh, joining ISEC marked a major transition, not only for myself moving from academic learning to applied industry practice, but also for the company's internal procurement operations. I stepped into a role that supported both ISEC's centralized logistics framework and the rapidly evolving needs of the S&S branch, which is poised for growth and operational expansion. This dual reality, me adapting to the role adapting to a change in company structure, meant that change was embedded from day one. Processes were not yet standardized across the board, cross-department communication varied, and the need for procurement-led logistics coordination was becoming more pronounced. My task is to prepare for, support, and sustain change on two levels: personally, by transitioning into a contributor with immediate operational value, and organizationally, by helping build the procurement logistics infrastructure S&S will increasingly rely on. This meant absorbing existing workflows while identifying where they could evolve so the company's purchasing systems could with scale with project demand, staffing, and complexity. The actions I can take is that I can proactively learn and document the current procurement processes, identifying areas where communication between vendors, PMs, and warehouse teams could be streamlined and repeatable for repeatable clarity. I can adapt from a project management mindset into a logistics integrated role, applying structured change readiness skills I developed academically, particularly around RAID tracking, escalation logic, and stakeholder alignment. I can create reference templates, vendor escalation workflows, and tracking tools that could be taught and reused, helping build structure for future onboarding and reduce knowledge silos. I can embed change sustainment by not just fixing issues, but training others to adopt those solutions, creating a shared understanding through walkthroughs, team shadowing, and internal resource sharing. I can support the groundwork for scaling the SNS branch, documenting POs, tracking logic, identifying staffing needs based on increasing project load, and highlighting where automation or role specialization could create future capacity. This ongoing change process has positioned me as a stabilizing and forward-thinking contributor. I can successfully transition into a functional procurement agent while also supporting broader operational change within a growing business unit. My ability to prepare for change, respond with adaptive structure, and sustain improvements through collaboration and documentation has helped reduce miscommunication, shorten learning curves, and anticipate future process leads. More than adapting to change, I've become a quiet driver of it. So, integration of change and our next section, which is systems thinking. Studying and applying the principle of change taught me that successful project transitions require more than process updates. They demand preparation, support, and reinforcement at every level. Change isn't an isolated event, it's a continuous process that ripples across teams, tools, expectations, and outcomes. To manage change effectively, I realized I had to understand not just what was changing, but how the change interacted with everything else. That insight naturally led me to systems thinking. Projects are dynamic systems made up of interdependent parts, and change, whether planned or unexpected, can impact those parts in unforeseen ways. Adopting a systems thinking mindset allowed me to step back, evaluate connections, and anticipate how adjustments in one area might influence results in another. Rather than reacting in fragments, I began responding holistically. The more I practice seeing change through the system lens, the more effective I can become at supporting transitions that actually stick because they account for the full ecosystem in which the project operates. Now moving on to systems thinking. PMI defines systems thinking as recognize, evaluate, and respond to dynamic circumstances within surrounding the project in a holistic way to positively affect project performance. A project is a system of interdependent and interacting domains of activity. System thinking entails taking a holistic view of how project parts interact with each other and with external systems. Systems are constantly changing, requiring consistent attention to the internal and external conditions. Being responsive to system interactions allows project teams to leverage positive outcomes. My definition is that I originally thought systems thinking referred to using structured tools or frameworks to analyze a project. After reviewing the definition by PMI, I now understand that systems thinking is a holistic mindset, a way of recognizing that every project is a system of interconnected parts, constantly influenced by internal dynamics and external conditions. It's about being responsive to how decisions, roles, and risks interact with each other, not in isolation, but in continuous motion. Systems thinking requires ongoing awareness, reflection, and evaluation so that each action supports, not disrupts, the overall health and performance of the project. It's not just about solving problems, it's about understanding how solving one problem might affect another part of the system. To best showcase this, my first example is Project Management 510, the Phoenix Public Art Mural Project. In this Case study, I led the planning phase for the Phoenix Public Art Mural Project, an initiative commissioned by the city that involved multiple interdependent domains: artistic integrity, community involvement, municipal regulations, budget adherence, and cultural representation. With city officials, local artists, sponsors, and neighborhood representatives all invested in different outcomes, it quickly became clear that the mural was not just an art project, it was a complex system of human behavior, institutional processes, and shifting community dynamics. My task was to create a project plan that honored the mural's artistic goals while managing stakeholder expectations, regulatory requirements, and budgetary boundaries. To succeed, I had to go above and beyond conventional planning and approach the project as a dynamic, interconnected system where changes in one domain, like public input or permitting, could ripple across the entire structure. I applied systems thinking by mapping cross-domain relationships, identifying how creative decisions would impact schedule buffers, community trust, and city approvals. I introduced a collaborative visioning process to align artists, city sponsors, and residents, knowing that a lack of consensus could delay approvals and reduce community buy-in. I designed a flexible Gantt schedule and accounted for creative variability while maintaining alignment with key permitting and funding deadlines. In budgeting, I differentiated between fixed and variable costs and built in contingencies to absorb fluctuations in material prices and labor timelines, ensuring resilience without sacrificing quality. I measure outcomes holistically. I developed a multi-dimensional success dashboard that incorporated both hard metrics, timeline, budget, scope, and soft indicators, stakeholder satisfaction, cultural resonance, and public feedback. The final project plan was recognized for its clarity, adaptability, and strategic balance between artistic freedom and municipal accountability. What made it effective wasn't just solid planning, it was integration of all moving parts into a single responsive system. This project reinforced my understanding that systems thinking is about recognizing patterns, anticipating consequences, and designing interactions, not just tasks. It strengthened my ability to plan not only for success, but for sustainability within a live civic environment. Next is again the project 582 Montpelier drone project. Again, our team was tasked with designing the full project plan for Montpelier's drone delivery pilot, a cross-functional initiative involving legal, IT, logistics, stakeholder outreach, and training. The project wasn't linear. Success depended on understanding how every component was interdependent and sensitive to change. A simple list of tasks wouldn't suffice. We needed a framework that reflected how shifts in one area could trigger cascading effects across others. My objective was to help build an integrated project system anchored by a detailed breakdown structure and network diagram that did more than assign tasks. It needed to visualize interactions, risks, and interdependencies that could impact delivery, risk posture, and long-term sustainability. This meant applying systems thinking, seeing the project not as a series of isolated activities, but a living system with timing, resource, and stakeholder implications. So the actions that we took is that I code developed the WBS with risk and sequencing in mind, ensuring that each work package was logically tied to deliverables, resource needs, and stakeholder inputs. I aligned the network diagram with the WBS hierarchy, highlighting where tasks like legal review and software development intersected with training timelines and risk mitigation layers. I identified critical paths and built feedback loops, for instance, connecting IT testing directly to training readiness and communications rollout, knowing that delays upstream could compromise system adoption and trust. I ensured each WBS element reflected risk ownership and sustainment impact. For example, customization delays increase stakeholder uncertainty, while training lag could weaken operational readiness. I contributed to the integration of the resource acquisition plan, ensuring contractor availability and staff allocation match task demands, avoiding workload and protecting flow across WBS branches. Our final work breakdown structure and network diagram became more than planning tools. They became a system intelligence platform. They help the team predict and prevent resource clashes, align training with technical readiness, and reinforce the timeline with realistic risk buffers. It allowed us to think beyond delivery to long-term sustainment, ensuring the plan could flex with uncertainty while still holding shape. This experience taught me that systems thinking isn't just a mindset, it's a method for designing resilient, risk-aware, and strategically connected projects. Um, the application for systems thinking in ISAC is that as a procurement agent supporting project managers on fast-paced construction projects, um, is a place where I could quickly realize that while each department, from detailing to purchasing to manufacturing, warehouse, and logistics, was highly skilled, the handoff between them often lacked visibility and cohesion. The project managers bore the weight of this complexity, and gaps in communication frequently led to avoidable schedule pressures for missed coordination opportunities. My objective became clear. I must learn the system, identify where communication or process breakdowns occurred, and begin mapping out a more integrated support model. I wanted to apply a system thinking's approach to procurement, not as a linear workflow, but as an interconnected project ecosystem where every delay or decision has ripple effects across multiple departments and timelines, which it does. I began tracking the end-to-end lifecycle of a single project PO from its origin with the PM and detailers through purchasing and vendor confirmations to lead times for manufacturers, warehouse staging, and shipwell logistics delivery. I created informal flowcharts and feedback logs that highlighted where timelines got bottlenecked due to lack of visibility or unclear ownership. For example, I noticed that a delay in detailing revisions could throw off vendor lead time windows without being flagged to procurement or the PM. I initiated conversations with details and warehouse leads to build better understanding and began tagging POs with critical project face notes for internal visibility. My ultimate aim is to propose a shared dashboard or rhythm of updates that make these interdependencies visible to everyone, not just PMs juggling the entire system on their own. While still early in implementation, this approach is already reshaping how I support project teams. I'm better able to anticipate risks before they escalate and can rely upstream information more proactively to manufacturers or the warehouse. Long term, my goal is to help break down functional silos at ISAC, enabling PMs, procurement, and operations to act as one coordinated system rather than isolated cogs. System thinking at ISAC means seeing not just where I sit, but what I do affects that everyone else can deliver, and using that visibility to strengthen outcomes across the board. So, embracing the principle of change taught me that successful outcomes aren't just the result of well executed plans, but of well supported transitions. Change must be prepared for, adopted, and sustained, not imposed. Yet the deeper lesson came when I began to see that change is rarely isolated. For every adjustment, every pivot affects and is affected by the broader system in which it occurs. That realization led me to systems thinking. Projects are not linear. They are living systems made up of interconnected decisions, roles, technologies, and expectations. When change occurs, it impacts is distributed across those connections. Systems thinking has reshaped how I evaluate problems and plan solutions. I now approach each project with the understanding that to truly lead change, I must account for how every part of the system interacts and evolves. This mindset doesn't just make me more responsive, it makes me more responsible and ensures that my actions are not only effective in the moment, but sustainable across the life of the project. In closing, the principles of Cluster 3, risk, complexity, change, and systems thinking, don't stand alone. They are made actionable through the foundations built in Cluster 1 and Cluster 2. Leadership and stewardship shape how I respond to complexity and clarity. Team dynamics and adaptability prepare me to absorb change without losing momentum. Stakeholder engagement and tailoring help ensure that risks are seen from multiple perspectives and managed with empathy. And principles like value and quality ensure that every change I support, every system I improve, contributes to meaningful long-term outcomes. What I've learned is that resilient project management isn't just technical, it's integrative. Each principle strengthens the others, and the more I align with them, the more I show up as a capable, trustworthy, and systems aware generalist. In part four, I'll bring this journey full circle by connecting these principles with my personal philosophy, my academic development, and my professional growth at ISAC. I'll explore how the PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct is not just a guideline, but a framework that I've already begun embedding into how I lead, decide, and collaborate in the real world. Thank you for joining me in this chapter. I look forward to the next series. Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to move on to our next portion in from structured to synergy, evolving into a values-driven PM generalist. Today, we'll be discussing the PMI Code of Ethics. Um, I believe ethical leadership doesn't begin when things go wrong. It begins with how we show up every day, making decisions and treat others with when no one is watching. So, welcome to this next part of my capstone series where I focus on the foundation of who I am as a project manager, my professional identity, and how it aligns with the PMI Code of Ethics, which is responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty. These values don't operate in isolation. Like the PMI principles, they are deeply interconnected, guiding how I lead, collaborate, and navigate challenges across complex environments. As a values-driven generalist, I've learned that technical skills deliver the work, but ethical consistency sustains the trust behind it. In this segment, I reflect on the real meaning of integrity in practice and how these values continue to shape my work, my leadership, and my contribution to the teams and systems I serve. Again, these code of ethics don't exist in a vacuum. You will see that I reuse some examples because in real projects, a single decision often reflects multiple values at once. Responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty work together, guiding how I lead, communicate, and uphold trust. Together, they form the ethical core of my project management identity. Starting first with responsibility. The PMI definition is responsibility is our duty to take ownership for the decisions we make or fail to make, the actions we take or fail to take, and the consequences that result. My definition, I originally understood responsibility as simply doing my part, completing tasks, meeting deadlines, and being dependable within my assigned role. While this foundation remains true, PMI's definition broadened my perspective. I now see responsibility as a deeper ethical commitment to take ownership, not just of what I do, but also of what I choose not to do. It means acknowledging the ripple effects of my decisions, anticipating consequences, and being accountable for both actions and inaction. This expanded view has helped me step into a more proactive and leadership-oriented mindset where responsibility is about contributing to the integrity and success of the entire project, not just my portion of it. The first example to exhibit here is in Project Management 511. I was tasked with conducting a comprehensive risk assessment. Again, for two aerial utility vendors bidding on a 1,000-mile insulator washing project. The project success depended on selecting a vendor that could not only meet operational demands, but uphold safety, continuity, and ethical standards. This was a high stakes evaluation, requiring more than a cost benefit analysis. It required me to own my integrity of the recommendation and the consequences tied to it. My task was to provide a transparent, evidence-based recommendation that accounted for long-term risk exposure, operational resilience, and vendor ethics. I had to ensure that the vendor selected would align with both the technical goals and the values of the organization. This required full ownership over the data analysis and the implications of my decision and exercise in professional and ethical responsibility. I conducted a side-by-side analysis of both vendors across multiple dimensions: safety, culture, licensing, risk posture, communication practices, and performance metrics. I identified that company number one, with a larger workforce, lower EMR, and a more agile safety management system, represented lower long-term risk and a stronger commitment to safety. I flagged companies number two's communication issues and high turnover as indicators of risk exposure that can compromise project execution. I recommended company number one based on a holistic view, not just their safety record, but their proactive system integrated approach to risk identification, mitigation, and communication. I prepared my report with full transparency, laying out both companies' strengths and weaknesses so that stakeholders could clearly see the reasoning and accountability behind the recommendation. My final report was recognized for its clarity, ethical integrity, and strategic foresight. It demonstrated my ability to take responsibility not just for analysis, but for outcomes. By making a defensible and forward-looking recommendation, I fulfilled a key component of professional responsibility, ensuring that my decisions protect the project's success and uphold the organization's standards. Okay, the next one is with Project Management 532, the Macondo Well case study. As you know, I took the role of a project risk strategist in reconstructing the Macondo Well project, a high-profile engineering disaster marked by catastrophic failures in communication, regulation, and foresight. The original incident, which resulted in the largest offshore oil spill in U.S. history, underscored the consequences of negligent risk management. My responsibility was to reframe the project's risk landscape through ethical and strategic foresight to prevent such outcomes from repeating. My objective was to develop a revised risk register addressing the operational, legal, environmental, communication, and safety protocol breakdowns that led to the disaster. This meant going beyond compliance. It meant taking full ownership of anticipating critical risks, proposing preventative measures, and aligning them with the project ethics and public accountability. The actions I took is that I identified five risk categories: well control failure, communication failures, marine ecosystem impact, high pressure drilling protocols, and regulatory compliance gaps. For each, I documented not only the technical exposure, but the ethical reasoning behind mitigation strategies, linking safety and compliance directly to responsible leadership. I incorporated industry case law, academic frameworks, and real-world references to support my recommendations. I emphasized rigorous BOP testing protocols, formalized communication workflows across stakeholders, and promoted early legal audits to ensure proactive compliance, each representing a deliberate, active project ownership and accountability. Rather than assigning blame, I focused on constructive responsibility, recommending structural reinforcements to governance, not just process. The result was a risk framework rooted in prevention, transparency, and ethical alignment. This artifact demonstrated that true responsibility in project management isn't about reacting to failure. It's about building systems that anticipate it and ensure others don't suffer the consequences of poor leadership. The project became a personal benchmark for me, a reminder that responsibility means owning both the system and the outcome, even when you didn't create the initial failure. How this is applied to my current role at ISEC. At ISEC, I support construction projects across a national delivery network as a procurement agent. The role requires real-time coordination across PMs, details, manufacturers, warehouse teams, and job site contacts. Early on, I realized that critical delivery risks often originated from unclear handoffs and unflagged delays, creating last-minute fire drills that impacted project flow. These issues weren't always mine to cause, but they quickly became mine to help resolve. My ongoing task has been to take responsibility for my portion of the system while anticipating how delays or oversight elsewhere could affect the outcome. That meant proactively managing communication, owning risk identification within procurement, and taking initiative, even when issues cross departmental boundaries. I applied lessons from the Macondo well case by identifying where silence or inaction could lead to avoidable disruption. I began tracking PO timelines more rigorously and flagging detailer-driven changes that could ripple through production and delivery. Drawing on the vendor assessment, I began recording contextual risk notes for high variability products or vendors, giving PMs advanced insights so they could adjust project sequencing early. I escalated issues with a sense of ownership, not just to offload them, but to provide options, timelines, and potential workarounds. I've also created internal visibility tools to monitor incoming lead times and support better coordination with the warehouse and shipwell delivery timelines. This approach has helped me reframe my role not as someone who moves POs down the pipeline, but as a project stakeholder who shares responsibility for continuity, clarity, and delivery success. I'm building trust with PMs and team leads by consistently showing that I don't wait for problems, I surface them, own them, and support the solution. PMI's principle of responsibility isn't just theory, it's a daily standard that now shapes how I contribute, how I communicate, and how I lead within my role. In terms of integration of responsibility, and the next code of ethic is respect. Responsibility and respect are deeply intertwined. Responsibility calls me to take ownership of outcomes, but respect reminds me how I carry that responsibility, especially in how I engage with others, matters just as much. I've learned that ethical project management isn't just about delivering results, it's about doing so in a way that honors the people involved, whether it's owning a mistake, communicating a delay, or stepping in to support a teammate. The integrity of my actions is only complete when it's paired with professionalism, empathy, and regard for others' contributions. Together, these values have shaped how I lead with accountability that uplifts and respect that strengthens collaboration. Moving on to respect. So, PMI's definition is that respect is our duty to show a high regard for ourselves, others, and the resources entrusted to us. Resources entrusted to us may include people, money, reputation, and safety of others, and natural or environmental resources. An environment of respect engenders trust, confidence, and performance excellence by fostering mutual cooperation. An environment where diverse perspectives and views are encouraged and valued. And so I initially viewed respect as basic professionalism, treating others courteously, listening when they speak, and avoiding conflict. While that's a start, PMI's definition helped me realize that respect in a project management goes much deeper. It's about actively valuing people, perspectives, and resources we're entrusted with, including time, safety, trust, and organizational reputation. It means fostering an environment where diverse voices aren't just heard but encouraged, and where collaboration is built on mutual regard. This shift taught me that respect isn't passive, it's something we create, protect, and extend, especially in high stress or high stakes environments. With that said, here's the first example, Project Management 533, White Team Leadership and Presentation Delivery. In this course, I served as the sole team leader for the White Team, a remote group spread across multiple tasks, backgrounds, and work schedules. Our task was to produce a comprehensive stakeholder engagement strategy for a case study project, culminating in a formal team presentation and a suite of deliverables. As the project intensified, team participation became uneven. Some members disengaged, others contributed late or minimally, and I was left carrying most of the structural workload. At times, it would have been easy to fall into frustration or blame. My task wasn't to ensure completion of the project, it was to lead ethically. That meant maintaining a culture of respect even when timelines slipped or contributions fell. In short, I had to find a way to protect project quality without undermining trust or devaluing others' efforts. My deeper challenge was to lead with patience, professionalism, and emotional discipline while still upholding the team's collective responsibility to deliver. The actions I took is that I built a flexible work plan that allowed space for late contributions without compromising progress, and I avoided calling out underperformance publicly, focusing instead on keeping momentum positive and inclusive. I adapted my communication tone to remain supportive even when I had to rework or supplement other sections, and I reframed delays as opportunities to realign or clarify project priorities. I set an example of respecting others' time and stress by keeping my messages brief, encouraging, and free of judgment while gently reminding the team of upcoming deadlines. When members did contribute, even late, I integrated their work without critique, recognizing that participation, however delayed, was still part of the team's process and success. I made sure the final presentation credited all team members, not just those who are the most active, reinforcing a message of shared accomplishment. We delivered all assignments on time, and the final presentation was well received for its clarity and strategic depth. But more importantly, the process helped me internalize that respect and leadership isn't conditional on performance, it's foundational to it. By honoring contributions, time, and circumstances of my teammates, even when they didn't match my own output, I created an environment of psychological safety and professionalism. PMI's definition of respect isn't just about being polite, it's about upholding dignity in action, especially when others fall short. That experience transformed how I lead and how I relate to people under pressure. The next one is from Project Manager 531 again, payment integration case study. I was assigned to analyze a failed cross-functional payment integration project. A highly skilled team was given an unrealistic 8-week deadline, half the time recommended by engineering leads. Constant requirement changes, stakeholder micromanagement, and intense multitasking led to stress, silos, and ultimately a barely functioning product riddled with post-launch defects. Despite the team's capability, the lack of support and empathy created a defensive climate where collaboration broke down. My role was to examine what went wrong and offer leadership recommendations, not just from a process standpoint, but from a people-centered ethical perspective. I needed to evaluate how I break down in respect for stakeholder roles, time, expertise, and psychological bandwidth contributed to systemic failure, and propose how future leaders could foster an environment where collaboration and trust could thrive again. The actions I took is that I identified core breakdowns in team dynamics, task overload, communication silos, unrealistic expectations, and disrespectful dismissal of expert feedback. I grounded my recommendations in relational theory, leadership theory, cultural intelligence, and shared leadership frameworks, and emphasized team empathy, inclusive communication, and role clarity. I proposed concrete actions, regular informal check-ins, and rebalancing of workload, clear boundaries between task expectations and success metrics tied to collaboration, not just speed. I highlighted the need for respect as an operational value, one that upholds trust, fosters cohesion, and strengthens resilience under pressure. This project helped me understand that respect in project management goes for far beyond interpersonal niceties. It is about protecting human bandwidth, listening to expertise, and structuring environments where people can contribute without burnout. By dissecting the failures and realigning with them with the PMI's principles of respect, I developed a more holistic view of what it means to lead and design project systems with dignity and psychological safety at the core. It shaped how I now treat time, communication, and collaboration not as a resources to extract, but as assets to protect. How this is applicable at ISEC in my current role is that I work across multiple departments and time zones supporting PMs, detailers, manufacturers, and warehouse staff on a wide range of fast-paced construction projects. The environment is high pressure, often shifting daily with revised lead times, last-minute spec changes, or evolving job site schedules. Early on, I noticed that friction points often are not from capability, but from miscommunication, time constraints, or unspoken stress. I realized that my ability to lead effectively wasn't just about staying organized, it was about respecting the workload, limitations, and communication styles of others. My task became twofold: maintaining consistent procurement execution while building collaborative, respectful relationships across functions. I needed to create clarity, support coordination, and do it in a way that upheld trust even when tensions or setbacks occurred. Respect in this case meant not only being professional, it meant making people feel seen and supported amid uncertainty. I adapted my communication strategies to match each stakeholder, brief and actionable for PMs, thorough and confirmation-based for manufacturers, and direct but conversational for warehouse teams. When details submitted late revisions or vendors missed acknowledgments, I didn't escalate emotionally. I responded with clarity, offering options and anchoring the conversation and shared goals. I developed a habit of tagging POs with key visibility notes, not just for tracking, but to help others prepare for what's coming. This simple step showed respect for others' time and reduced avoidable chaos. I modeled patience when teammates missed updates or misunderstood instructions, knowing that many were managing competing project demands. Instead of blame, I offered reinforcement and clarity. Over time, this project strengthened my credibility and trust with PMs, vendors, and warehouse leads alike. Team members now proactively share updates with me because they know they'll be received with professionalism, not pressure. I've come to see that respect is not reactive, it's proactive. It's a mindset of partnership, even under stress, and daily choice to treat people with dignity, regardless of deliverables. This practice has reinforced PM's principle in a real world, high stakes environment. Respect sustains performance, not the other way around. Respect and fairness are inseparable in ethical project management when it comes to integration. Respect ensures that every person and contribution is valued. Fairness ensures that every decision is made with integrity and impartiality. Together, they shape how I lead, especially under pressure. I've learned that showing respect means listening before deciding, and fairness means making those decisions transparently without bias or favoritism. Whether allocating tasks, evaluating input, or navigating conflict, I aim to create environments where people feel I heard and treated them equitably. These values don't just promote collaboration, they build the trust that projects depend on. When I lead with respect, I create space. When I act with fairness, I create that space. Now on to fairness. The definition of fairness is by PMI is fairness is our duty to make decisions and act impartially and objectively. Our conduct must be free from competing self-interest, prejudice, and favoritism. I initially understood fairness as simply treating people equally, giving everyone the same opportunity to contribute. The PMI's definition expanded that view. Fairness isn't just about equal treatment, it's about making decisions impartially and objectively, even when under pressure or when personal bias might try to take hold. It means actively checking my own assumptions, avoiding favoritism, and ensuring my actions are free from self interest. I've come to see that fairness is a leadership discipline. It requires clarity, consistency, and the courage to stand by what's right, even when it's not the easiest path. In project work, that means creating space for balanced input, holding everyone, including myself, accountable to the same standard, and ensuring that decisions serve the project and the people behind it. With that said, our first example is from Project Manage 532, the Corrupt Gas Stakeholder Analysis. This is where I conducted a stakeholder analysis of the Corrupt Gas project led by Shell, ENP Ireland, SEPL, a highly contested development that faced strong opposition from local communities, environmental groups, and activists. The project stakeholder environment was politically and socially charged, and SEPL's approach revealed major failures in transparency, stakeholder inclusion, and equitable engagement. My task was to identify where SEPL had fallen short in its engagement strategy and recommended how fairness, both procedural and perceptual, could have mitigated conflict, built trust, and contributed to long-term project sustainability. I need to evaluate stakeholder salience, design equitable communication plans, and propose a strategy that acknowledge power imbalances without bias or favoritism. The way I did this is that I categorized all primary and secondary stakeholders using power, legitimacy, and urgency frameworks, revealing that SEPL had disproportionately prioritized internal voices and government alignment while sidelining local landowners and NGOs. I developed an interest power matrix and proposed a tiered engagement strategy that balanced influence with inclusion, ensuring that even non-supportive or lower power stakeholders were consulted meaningfully. I introduced fairness-based engagement practices such as monthly town halls for local communities, 24/7 feedback portals for landowners, public environmental reporting for NGOs, and equal communication channels for both supporters and opponents. I drew on Sylvius and Schipper's sustainability frameworks and Mitchell et al.'s stakeholder salience theory to emphasize procedural equity, transparency, and long-term trust building. Through this case, I demonstrated how fairness and stakeholder engagement isn't just about conflict prevention, it's about building legitimacy. My engagement strategy placed all parties, supportive, neutral, or opposed, on equal footing through accessible channels, open feedback mechanisms, and role-sensitive communication. This project sharpened my understanding that fairness requires actively correcting imbalance, not just avoiding bias. It taught me that the ethical project managers don't just listen to the loudest voices, they create structures where every voice has a chance to shape the outcome. Next is Project Management 533, Stakeholder Value Proposition. As part of the white team in Project Management 533, I helped develop a comprehensive stakeholder value proposition for the Heathrow Terminal 5 case study. We were tasked with identifying key stakeholder groups ranging from TSA staff and baggage handlers to passengers, parking attendants, and the general public, and assessing the value they both brought to the project and received from it. Each group had a different power level, needs, and visibility, and it was critical to ensure no voice was minimized due to convenience or influence. My role was to create an evaluative framework that measured stakeholder importance through five value dimensions: perceived, planned, investment, project, and exchange value. The challenge was to ensure each group, regardless of status, was assessed with the same criteria, promoting balance and ethical consideration. This demanded fairness in analysis, um, representation, and engagement strategy to avoid marginalizing low power stakeholders who still contributed to project success. The actions I took is I developed a stakeholder value map for passengers, drawing from academic models like Hiroshi's value iceberg and the stakeholder value chain, ensuring consistent, objective evaluation across all groups. I ensured our teams treated high visibility and low visibility stakeholders equally in both written and verbal presentation formats. For example, parking attendants and baggage handlers were analyzed with the same rigor as regulatory staff or public facing roles. I emphasized non-biased communication strategy recommendations like public feedback loops and value exchange mechanisms for lower power groups. These included proposing post-project training, real-time communication channels, and equitable onboarding support. I advocated for fairness in both stakeholder salience and communication design, ensuring project benefits are accessible, not just broadcasted. The result was a stakeholder framework that demonstrated measured fairness, avoiding the common pitfalls of prioritizing only high influence participants. The project deliverable was praised for its depth and balance, and our team presentation reflected a values driven approach to stakeholder engagement. This experience taught me that fairness is not passive objectivity, it's active balance. As a project manager, I now know I now approach stakeholder assessment and engagement with equal rigor and regard, regardless of power or convenience, ensuring every group's value is ethically represented. How this is applied to ISEC. So, as in my current role and working with multiple departments and all have their own timelines, stress points, and communication rhythms. I realize that as procurement tasks pile up and pressure builds to meet delivery windows, the natural temptation in a fast-moving environment is to prioritize those with the loudest voice or most visible authority, often the project managers. However, I realized early that doing so would create blind spots and imbalance across the system. My responsibility was to treat all internal and external stakeholders with fairness, ensuring that coordination efforts weren't disproportionately focused on just one group. I need to make sure that communication, visibility, and issue resolution were distributed equitably, regardless of a stakeholder's position or influence in the project hierarchy. The actions I can take and will take is that I can establish a rhythm of communication that gave equal consideration to warehouse staff, detailers, and PMs, ensuring that no one group became the default priority while others were sidelined. I created internal PO notes that captured not just what was needed, but why, making it easier for everyone from vendors to warehouse leads to understand the context and make informed decisions. When vendor conflicts arose, I ensured that I was using objective information, lead times, acknowledgement history, and communication records rather than subjective pressure from any one stakeholder. And I maintained transparency in all follow-ups and escalations and made it a point to loop in relevant contributors at the same time, regardless of title or authority, so that everyone had a shared view of the issue and solution. This approach is going to help me reinforce a more balanced working environment. My PMs appreciate the clarity and consistency, but so did the warehouse team and external vendors who now felt seen and equally supported. I can build trust across departments by showing that I wouldn't prioritize based on status, but based on project need and fairness and execution. PMI's principle of fairness became real to me in this role, not as a compliance task, but as a leadership ethic. Taught me that when everyone is treated with equal care, the system runs stronger and the people within it more united. With that said, we're moving on to the integration of fairness in our next code, which is honesty. Fairness and honesty are deeply connected because it's not enough to treat people equally if you aren't also transparent with them. Fairness calls me to act impartially without bias, but honesty ensures that those actions are grounded in truth, clarity, and ethical consistency. I've learned that when stakeholders understand not just what I've decided, but why trust follows, in both analysis and execution, I strive to present the facts as they are, not just what's convenient or comfortable. These two values guide how I communicate under pressure, how I justify decisions, and how I maintain trust across roles. Together, they form the ethical backbone of how I lead with integrity, balance, and transparency. And finally, honesty. So, PMI's definition of honesty is our duty to understand the truth and act in a truthful manner, both in our communications and in our conduct. I initially understood honesty as simply telling the truth, being transparent when asked, and avoiding deception, but PMI's definition challenged me to go further. Honesty isn't just about avoiding lies, it's about having the discipline to seek the truth, acknowledge it, and communicate it with clarity, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. It means owning not just the facts, but also the impact of how those facts are shared or withheld. I've come to see honesty as a leadership habit, one that shows up in how I report delays, escalate risks, give feedback, and hold myself accountable in every interaction. It's the foundation of trust, and in project environments, trust is everything. With that said, going on to our first example is Project Management 511, Risk and Procurement Case Study. Again, this is a case study where I evaluate the two aerial utility vendors competing for the insulator washing project. The decision carried significant risk exposure tied to safety, licensing, and project continuity. While one vendor appeared more responsive and familiar on the surface, I quickly discovered inconsistencies in the reporting and communication practices, raising ethical red flags. I had to decide whether to follow convenience or commit to full transparency, even if it challenged assumptions. My task was to provide an impartial, evidence-based vendor recommendation that balanced operational capacity with ethical viability. Honesty in this context meant more than stating facts. It meant being willing to highlight uncomfortable truths, making a tough call and justify the decision clearly and objectively to stakeholders. I conducted a side-by-side vendor evaluation using criteria including experience modification rating, safety documentation, workforce scale, and communication records. I noted while vendor number two had a faster sales response, their lack of follow-through, weaker documentation, and unclear subtractor relationships created long-term risk. I resisted the pressure to favor familiarity and instead recommended vendor number one, a company with a stronger safety culture, transparent reporting structure, and more sustainable risk exposure and posture. I structured my final report to highlight both strengths and vulnerabilities in each vendor's profile, ensuring that stakeholders had a complete and honest picture, not just a recommendation. The report was praised for its clarity and depth, but more importantly, it reflected my growth in applying honesty as a leadership ethic. I learned that procurement and project management honesty isn't passive, it's proactive. It means not only speaking the truth, but also doing the work to understand it fully and communicate it with integrity. That decision reinforced my belief that honesty evaluation builds long-term trust, even when it challenges short-term convenience. Next is again, the Macondo well case study. Uh, in this, of course, I analyzed the Deepwater Horizon disaster through the lens of risk management and ethical leadership. BP's handling of the Macondo well was marked by delayed communication, withheld data, and fractured decision making. Critical information, such as failed negative pressures tests and equipment faults, was either ignored or compartmentalized. These lapses in transparency and interdepartmental honesty ultimately contributed to one of the worst environmental disasters in history. My task was to reconstruct a revised ethically sound risk register that only addressed technical failures, but also corrected the communication breakdowns and ethical breaches that escalated the crisis. I needed to demonstrate how proactive honesty in decision making, risk escalation, and internal reporting could have altered the outcome and preserved both human lives and public trust. The actions I took is that I analyzed the original risk flow and identified key points where truth was compromised, from the misinterpretation of safety data to the isolation of key stakeholders during high pressure drilling decisions. I rebuilt the risk register around principles of honest escalation, transparent communication, and systems level visibility, including flags for communication silos, test integrity checks, and cultural resistance to whistleblowing. I emphasized the ethical imperative to share difficult information even when it disrupted timelines or challenged leadership assumptions. I tied each risk category to a corresponding honesty safeguard, such as a cross-functional risk review protocols and formal accountability structures in the reporting chain. The revised register was not just technically sound, it was ethically aligned. It highlighted how open communication and integrity in decision making could have prevented tragedy. More importantly, it shaped how I now approach project risk, not just as a technical exercise, but as a test of professional honesty. I learned that ethical project management isn't just about doing things right, it's about having the courage to speak up when things feel wrong. Honesty, in this case, is what separates reactive damage control from proactive risk leadership. And how can I apply this at ISEC? Um, as I manage procurements for large scale construction projects that require coordination across project managers, details, manufacturers, and warehouse teams, I can each day present dynamic changes, spec revisions, delayed acknowledgements, job site sequencing shifts, many of which threaten delivery continuity, if not escalated early. Because of this, I quickly realized that being honest in this environment isn't just about reporting what happened, it's about making sure the right people know what's coming. Transparency is the only way to keep the system aligned. So, my task here is being able to act as a truth teller in the workflow, proactively flagging delays, clarifying risks, and ensuring that project stakeholders get accurate, context rich information. This meant developing the discipline to speak up early and clearly, even when it revealed uncomfortable truths such as misaligned timelines or missed vendor confirmations. Honesty in my role became about integrity and communication, not just factual accuracy. I began tagging high-risk POs with contextual notes to give PMs and warehouse leads early visibility on potential delays, whether from late detailing revisions or uncertain vendor lead times. When I noticed recurring lapses in vendor acknowledgments, I didn't just let them slip through the cracks. I elevated the issue with supporting documentation, outlining patterns that justified a review of vendor coordination practices. I worked with PMs to clarify timeline expectations, especially when spec revisions or job site readiness didn't align with ship schedules, ensuring everyone was working with the same facts. Most importantly, I developed a habit of over communicating early so stakeholders were never blindsided later. I made it a point to speak plainly, support my claims, and focus on solutions without downplaying potential risks. This commitment to honest coordination has improved trust and communication across functions. PMs and warehouse staff increasingly rely on my updates to anticipate and adjust rather than react in crisis. More than once, a simple early note or call prevented a missed delivery or misaligned job site plan. I've come to see that honesty in project work is about alignment, not blame. When I'm clear, transparent, and consistent, I help the team stay ahead of problems and reinforce a culture of accountability and integrity across the system. So, with that said, the integration of responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty. These four virtues, four values, honesty, responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty do not operate in isolation. They are interdependent, reinforcing each other to shape not only how I manage projects, but how I lead people, navigate pressure, and uphold trust. Responsibility grounds me in accountability. I own outcomes of my decisions, both intended and unintended, but that accountability means little without respect, which reminds me that people, not just plans, are the heart of every project. Fairness gives structure to that respect and ensures that no voice is overshadowed, no decision is made with hidden bias, and no shortcut is taken at the expense of equity. And honesty is what gives each of these values integrity. It's the through line that turns principle into practice. It's how I communicate, how I escalate risk, and how I earn the trust of stakeholders across every level. Together, these values form the ethical architecture of my identity as a project manager. They guide how I think, how I act, and how I contribute, not just to deliverables, but to culture. And in a world of complexity, ambiguity, and change, they are what keep me grounded, credible, and clear. So, in closing, these code of ethics don't exist in isolation again, but neither do the PMI principles. Together, they form the framework that guides not only what I do, but how I do it. Responsibility aligns with stewardship and leadership, reminding me that I own the outcome and must act with intention and integrity. Respect shapes how I build and support teams, engage stakeholders, and foster collaboration through adaptability and resilience. Fairness reinforces tailoring, quality, and value, ensuring that solutions are inclusive, standards are upheld, and every voice contributes meaningfully. Honesty is foundational to risk, change, complexity, and systems thinking because transparency, clarity, and truth drive sound decisions across dynamic systems. In practice, I reuse some of these examples because these principles and values often converge. A single act of leadership might reflect respect, fairness, and adaptability. A risk decision may reveal both responsibility and honesty. These overlaps are not contradictions, they're proof that ethical project management is holistic. This integration is the core of who I am, becoming a values-driven, systems-aware, and people-centered project leader. Thank you for joining me in this chapter. I look forward to our next portion. Bye. Hello. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Jeffrey West, and this is presentation marks the final part of my capstone series from structure to synergy evolving into a values-driven PM generalist. In this segment, I'll be sharing my short-term and long-term goals for continuing my development in project management, guided by the PMI principles and the code of ethics that have shaped my growth. So, success in project management isn't just built on skills, it's built on principles, values, and continuous growth. In this final segment, I outline my short and long-term goals for applying the PMI principles and code of ethics to my ongoing development. My philosophy of project management is that it is a values-driven, adaptive, and ethical discipline rooted in stakeholder collaboration, continuous learning, and iterative improvement. I believe that effective project management merges theory with practical application to deliver resilient and effective solutions in complex environments. In this final segment, I'll outline my short and long-term goals for applying the PMI principles and code of ethics to my professional development, as said. In the short term, my focus is to integrate these principles into mastering every aspect of the construction industry and showcasing my readiness to move from procurement into a project management role at ISAC. In the long term, my goal is to fully transition into project management and continue refining my ability to deliver real value to stakeholders by living out these principles daily and ultimately to master the craft of being a values-driven, resilient PM generalist. Before we move forward into my short-term goals, I want to point out that the principles and code of ethics don't exist in a vacuum. As I move forward, my short-term and long-term goals are designed to intentionally weave these standards into how I work, lead, and grow. In real projects, a single action often reflects multiple principles at once, just as responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty often intersect with leadership, stewardship, and systems thinking. In the short term, my focus is on applying these values consistently within my current role, building ethical habits in decision making, communication, and stakeholder engagement. In the long term, as I transition into a project management role at ISEC and complete my DBA, my goal is to embed these principles into how I lead teams, manage complexity, deliver value, and support organizational transformation. Integrating the PMI framework isn't a milestone, it's a path I'll walk every day as I continue evolving into a values-driven project leader. Strong long-term growth starts with consistent short-term action. Here's how I'm applying these principles immediately within my current role at ISEC. So with stewardship, at ISEC, I observed that while procurement tasks were executed accurately, broader project impacts like delayed deliveries or missed scope updates often fell into gray areas with no clear ownership. My goal is to take greater initiative in owning not just my purchasing tasks, but the interconnected workflows that link procurement, detailing, warehouse, and job site delivery, demonstrating true project stewardship. How I plan on doing this is drawing from how I built visibility tools at ISAC. I will initiate cross-functional working sessions, introduce a shared urgency flag system inside our ComSense system for high-risk orders and proactively surface gaps, whether or not they are strictly procurement related. This mirrors the servant leadership approach I applied in PMG 533 with my white team, ensuring all voices and risks are recognized early. Hopefully, the result is by expanding my accountability, I will not only improve project delivery alignment, but also model a stewardship mindset where protecting team capacity, job site momentum, and resource integrity become part of my daily routine and contribution. When it comes to the team's short-term goal, at ISEC, collaboration across purchasing, PMs, and warehouse teams often depend on informal communication, leading to misalignment under pressure. I aim to strengthen cross-departmental collaboration by building structured feedback and communication loops that prioritize early warning and shared solutions. This is similar to how I formalized team norms during my project management 533 stakeholder strategy project. Our proposed lightweight feedback check-ins every 2 weeks, use updated ComSense notes for project staging alerts, and model transparency by sharing procurement bottlenecks before they escalate. Hopefully, this will shift communication from reactive troubleshooting to proactive collaboration, fostering a resilient, aligned team culture that can better manage complexity under changing project conditions. When it comes to stakeholders, I know that the internal and external stakeholders sometimes receive or late or unclear updates, contributing to frustration and rework. My goal is to strengthen relationships by adopting a stakeholder engagement approach that mirrors the proactive, tailored communication strategies I used in the SEPL Core of Gas stakeholder engagement plan. I will map internal and external stakeholders per project, align my communication style to each through frequency, format, and urgency of each stakeholder group, create early warning systems using ComSense and email flags when changes affect them. This will hopefully be treating stakeholders as strategic partners, not just recipients of information. I will build trust, foster better coordination, and position procurement as a collaborative strategic function at ISEC. When it comes to value, procurement impact at ISEC is often invisible until something goes wrong, creating missed opportunities to demonstrate proactive value. Uh, this can be mitigated by tracking and reporting procurement impact metrics to show how early intervention and risk management create tangible project value, uh, as well as building on how I propose tracking lead times and vendor performance metrics during project management 582. I can develop simple dashboards that track purchase order approval, lead times, vendor fulfillment rates, and early identification of at-risk orders tied to project milestones. This will create a clearer picture of procurement's contribution to project success, support data-driven improvements, and build credibility for expanding procurement's role in strategic project planning. When it comes to systems thinking, procurement touches every part of the construction delivery chain, yet siloed thinking can blindside the system when changes occur. My short-term goal is to expand my systems thinking, mapping dependencies and interdependencies across procurement, manufacturing, shipping, and job site stages. How I can do this is similar to the RAID log. I can create that I did for the Montpelier drone project, as well as Project Management 582. I will refine internal ComSense tagging and create visual maps of how procurement decisions impact downstream activities such as staging, sequencing, or change order management. This will give my PMs and detailers real-time visibility into system impacts, helping the entire team better predict, mitigate, and adapt to risks, ultimately enhancing project stability. When it comes to leadership at ISEC, leadership opportunities often emerge organically through how problems are solved, not through titles. My goal is to lead from within my role by modeling ethical, proactive behavior, just as I did in my procurement visibility tracker initiative that improved PM and warehouse coordination. I will continue surfacing issues with solution-focused recommendations, maintaining clarity and professionalism even under stress, and supporting others in cross-functional meetings by framing risks as shared challenges rather than blaming points. Hopefully, this consistency embodies all of this behavior. so that I can build trust, influence, and leadership credibility, showing that leadership is about how we serve and guide others regardless of authority. When it comes to tailoring, at ISAC, project types vary dramatically from fast-paced tenant improvement projects to long-term ground-up builds. My goal is to tailor communication, coordination, and procurement workflows to suit project flexibility, team preferences, and risk profiles. Drawing from my Project Management 533 Heathrow project, I will use stakeholder grids and tailoring matrices to adjust reporting frequency, meeting structures, and visibility tools depending on project type, client demand, and manufacturing constraints. This flexible, context-sensitive approach will enhance efficiency, stakeholder satisfaction, and overall project agility. When it comes to quality, poor procurement documentation or loose vendor tracking can cause cascading quality failures during project execution. My goal is to increase procurement internal quality assurance through improved documentation and vendor management. Following lessons from Project Management 582's acquisition plan work, I will standardize PO language, implement better vendor acknowledgements, tracking, and build vendor scorecards tracking fulfillment accuracy, communication quality, and issue resolution. This systematic approach will reduce rework, minimize field installation errors, and reinforce a culture of quality first procurement. For complexity, procurement workflows are inherently complex with dependencies on specifications, shipping logistics, and real-time project site needs. I aim to continue identifying and managing complexity by building tracking systems and visibility tools and expose hidden risks and critical interdependencies. Uh, to do this, expanding on my Project Management 582 complexity mapping exercises, I will document and tag complexity events like split shipments, vendor coordination gaps, and spec revisions, allowing teams to forecast disruption before it materializes. By making complexity visible early, I can help stabilize workflows, align stakeholder expectations, and reduce mid-project chaos. With risks are tied to procurement, such as spec drift, late approvals, or manufacturing delays, often go underreported until they escalate. I will embed RAID-driven risk thinking into my daily procurement workflow to improve early detection and coordinated mitigation. Building from the risk frameworks I created during Project 511 and Project Management 532, I will log procurement risks by project phase, escalate high severity risks with pre-developed response options, and collaborate with PMs to align responses to project thresholds. This structured risk visibility will help minimize disruptions, protect project timelines and budgets, and enhance cross-functional trust. When it comes to adaptability and resilience, shifting vendor lead times, client change orders, and job site conditions demand constant adaptation within procurement. I aim to maintain steady, consistent performance while helping others build resilience under changing conditions. Mirroring the resilience tactics I used in the Project Management 553, 531 payment integration failure analysis, I will build contingency plans for critical orders, maintain alternative sourcing pathways, and model emotional regulation when dealing with disruption. Hopefully, this will foster a team culture that stays steady under pressure, reacts strategically rather than emotionally, and builds long-term organizational resilience. With change, ISEC's procurement processes are evolving, but adoption of new systems and visibility practices remain inconsistent. I want to actively support organizational change by increasing procurement transparency and accountability in a way that stakeholders can easily engage with. Drawing from change enablement practices studied in Project Management 531, I will pilot initiatives like visible PO status dashboards, vendor readiness scorecards, and simple change impact reports during key project phases. By making procurement data and risk more transparent, I will reduce change fatigue, support project adaptation, and strengthen procurement's role as a proactive partner in ISEC's larger project delivery evolution. While short-term habits build the foundation, long-term vision defines the direction. My future goals expand the application of these principles into formal leadership, growing my impact as a project manager. So with stewardship, throughout my work at ISEC, I've seen how short-term decision-making without strategic alignment can lead to resource waste, missed client expectations, and rework. My long-term goal is to champion value-driven project governance as a project manager, ensuring execution aligns not only with immediate project goals, but with ISEC's long-term strategic vision. Building on the stewardship practices I refined in Project Management 503's Green Floor Sustainability Project, I'll advocate for project plans that integrate life cycle thinking, stakeholder sustainability, and cross-project knowledge transfer. I'll push for governance checkpoints that measure both short-term deliverables and long-term business value. This strategic stewardship will help ISEC deliver projects that aren't just completed on time, but on budget, but projects that strengthen client trust, reduce operational drag, and build a resilient, future-ready project portfolio. When it comes to team, project success is as much about how the team operates as it is about technical execution. Psychological safety and collaboration are foundational, but often overlooked under pressure. My long-term goal is to build and lead project teams that are psychologically safe, collaborative, and resilient. Drawing from my leadership experiences in Project Management 533's White Team and my current coordination with warehouse and PM staff at ISEC, I'll lead by fostering open communication, creating clear shared goals, modeling vulnerability when mistakes happen, and embedding team retrospectives into the project life cycle. By building a culture of safety, respect, and mutual ownership, I will enable teams to perform at a higher level, reducing turnover, strengthening innovation, and improving project outcomes even under high stress conditions. With stakeholders, ISEC's success increasingly depends on multi-phase and high visibility projects with diverse shifting stakeholder landscapes. I aim to develop scalable, repeatable stakeholder engagement strategies that anticipate stakeholder evolution throughout the project lifecycle. Leveraging the frameworks I built for the Sepulchre gas plant and Project Management 582's drone delivery pilot, I will design module engagement models using power interest grids, communication matrices, and adaptive check-ins schedules that can flex across project phases and stakeholder influence shifts. This approach will ensure stakeholder alignment remains proactive, minimizing conflict and maximizing long-term buy-in, turning stakeholders into active collaborators rather than passive risk points. For value, projects often succeed technically, but fail to deliver lasting value because operational needs and client expectations drift apart over time. My long-term goal is to ensure that project outcomes align seamlessly with both client satisfaction and operational sustainability. Building on my procurement impact tracking efforts at ISEC, I will incorporate value tracking metrics into project management plans, such as cost of ownership reductions, operational efficiency improvements, and post-delivery client feedback cycles. This will ensure that projects not only meet contractual deliverables, but also build reputational, operational, and financial value, enhancing client retention and long-term project viability. With systems thinking, project failures often stem not from isolated mistakes, but from failures to recognize and manage interconnected system dynamics. My goal is to apply full systems thinking to project planning, execution, and closeout, treating projects as dynamic ecosystems, not static plans. Building on my RAID-based risk and complexity mapping from Project Management 582 and ISEC procurement operations, I will proactively map interdependencies, create feedback loops for lessons learned, and embed cross-phase integration plans into each project's design. This systems first approach will help prevent downstream surprises, foster innovation, and build smarter, more adaptive projects that evolve with changing conditions rather than being derailed by them. When it comes to leadership, leading projects requires more than technical competence. It requires the ability to unify people behind a clear vision while maintaining operational discipline. I aim to transition into a formal project management role at ISEC where I can lead projects with decisiveness, ethical consistency, and inspiring clarity. Expanding on the leadership models I explored in Organizational Leadership 510, and Project Management 533. I will blend transformational leadership practices, vision setting, emotional intelligence with situational leadership tactics, adaptability, task alignment to serve both people and outcomes. By leading with integrity, clarity, and responsiveness, I will build project teams that are engaged, productive, and aligned to deliver not just technical results, but lasting stakeholder trust. With tailoring, one-size-fits-all project delivery models often fail when complexity or stakeholder diversity increases. My long-term goal is to develop a flexible project management toolkit that allows me to tailor delivery methods to project needs and stakeholder dynamics. Building on my project management 533 Heathrow and project management 582 pilot tailoring experience, I will develop standard operating templates, but customize stakeholder engagement plans, scheduling cadences, risk strategies, and communication workflows based on project size, regulatory exposure, and team maturity. This tailored approach will maximize project agility, stakeholder satisfaction, and executional precision, delivering high performance outcomes even in volatile, uncertain, complex environments. With quality, reactive quality management creates a late stage project risk, reputational damage, and increased costs. I aim to lead projects where quality assurance is built proactively across planning, execution, and closeout, not inspected in at the end. Expanding my current focus on vendor tracking and procurement documentation at ISEC, I will integrate quality KPIs into project charters, build QC checkpoints into schedules, and champion early quality ownership among team members and vendors. This proactive integrated quality management will reduce rework, enhance client trust, and strengthen ISEC's reputation for delivering excellence consistently. With complexity, complexity is increasing across ISEC's national projects through regulatory demands, multi-vendor coordination, and evolving technologies. My goal is to learn to anticipate, map, and navigate complexity systematically as a PM, especially across multi-site and multi-vendor projects. Applying the complexity mapping strategies I used for Project Management 582's drone pilot and ISEC's procurement challenges, I will build dependency matrices, risk-based WBS structures, and communication escalation paths to prevent complexity from snowballing into project failure. With complexity managed proactively, ISEC projects can remain agile, aligned, and resilient even under high variable conditions. Major projects often succeed or fail based on how well risks are anticipated, owned, and integrated into governance structures. With risk, my long-term goal is to own the full risk strategy for major projects, embedding ethical risk management from project initiation through closeout. Building from my Project 511 and Project 532 experiences, I will develop RAID-based risk frameworks, phase-gated escalation processes, stakeholder-aligned mitigation plans, and ethical risk response models that balance short-term pressures with long-term reputation and safety. This structured, principled approach to risk management will safeguard ISEC's projects, clients, and brand while reducing firefighting and enabling smarter project evolution. With adaptability and resilience in a world of constant change, project leaders must build teams that can pivot without fracturing under pressure. I am to lead adaptive, resilient teams that thrive through change, not just survive it. Drawing from my experiences adapting procurement coordination at ISEC and studying change leadership in Project Management 531, I will cultivate team resilience through transparent communication, psychological safety, early risk surfacing, and redundant planning. Adaptive teams will enable ISEC to respond to client shifts, regulatory updates, or market volatility with stability, creativity, and sustainable high performance. With change, project outcomes are often tied to how well change is enabled, supported, and sustained across teams and stakeholders. My goal is to lead and facilitate successful change adoption through ethical, human-centered project management. Leveraging the change management practices I explored in Project Management 531 and my own process evolution at ISEC, I will integrate structured change communication plans, early stakeholder engagement, emotional support systems, and reinforcement activities into project delivery cycles. This approach will help stakeholders embrace change, reduce adoption resistance, and ensure project benefits are sustained long after technical implementation is complete. Again, these goals aren't isolated tasks. They are anchored in the PMI principles and the code of ethics, ensuring that technical proficiency is always matched by ethical leadership and strategic thinking. That said, integration of PMI code of ethics into my short-term and long-term goals with responsibility across my experiences from leading procurement at ISEC to analyzing vendor risks in Project Management 511, success has often hinged not on what tasks were assigned to me, but on how much ownership I took for outcomes across the full project system. To integrate responsibility fully into my short-term and long-term goals, I must actively own the risks, communication gaps, and system impacts tied to my work, even when they fall outside traditional procurement duties. Short term, I'll embed responsibility by surfacing risks earlier, proactively escalating project bottlenecks, and offering solution focused updates to PMs and warehouse teams. Long term, as a project manager, I will champion governance structures that make responsibility visible across project phases, such as risk ownership matrices, stakeholder accountability frameworks, and lessons learned integrations. By practicing responsibility daily, I will evolve from being a functional contributor to a strategic leader, someone who protects project health across procurement, risk, quality, complexity, and systems thinking. Responsibility will be the ethical core that transforms my stewardship into tangible, respected project impact. With respect, leading the remote white team in Project Management 533 showed me that respect isn't just about courtesy, it's about proactive leadership practice that maintains psychological safety even under pressure. At ISEC, I saw firsthand how respecting everyone's time and workload improved procurement and warehouse collaboration. To integrate respectfully, I must consistently value people's perspectives and resources in every decision and communication, especially as project complexity and stress increase. Short term, I will model respect by tailoring my communication to each stakeholder, PMs, vendors, warehouse teams, using transparency and patience rather than urgency and blame. Long term, as a PM, I will build team environments where open feedback, psychological safety, and diverse viewpoints are structurally encouraged through team norms, collaboration metrics, and inclusive planning processes. Respect will not only improve daily collaboration, it will be the foundation for building resilient engaged teams that outperform under pressure. It will ensure that as I grow into project leadership, I do so while uplifting the people and systems I lead, not merely directing them. With honesty, from analyzing the Macondo well disaster in Project Management 532 to proactively flagging risk gaps in ISIC procurement, I learned that honesty in project work isn't optional, it's vital. Delayed or diluted information damages trust, magnifies risks, or fractures teams. To integrate honesty deeply, I must practice early, transparent, context-rich communication at every project phase, even when surfacing inconvenient or uncomfortable truths. Short term, I'll maintain early risk tagging on POs, escalate delivery and procurement issues with clear evidence, and communicate project impacts realistically, not optimistically. Long term, I'll build risk registers, stakeholder reports, and project dashboards that make systems vulnerabilities visible to leadership and stakeholders, building trust through transparency, not control. This will ensure that honesty will safeguard not just my reputation, but the reputation of the teams and organizations I represent. It will differentiate me as a project leader who protects trust, empowers decision making, and turns ethical clarity into executional excellence across risk, systems thinking, and change management. When it comes to fairness, during the Sepulchre gas stakeholder analysis and the Heathrow T5 stakeholder mapping in Project Management 533, I saw how unfair engagement practices corrode trust and how active, visible fairness strengthens legitimacy. In procurement at ISEC, I saw how small biases in priority could marginalize critical partners like the warehouse or detailers. To fully integrate fairness, I must ensure that stakeholder interaction, task assignment, or decision I make is balanced, objective, and free from hidden bias or favoritism. Short term, I'll balance my communication and coordination efforts equally across PMs, detailers, warehouse staff, and vendors, using objective facts to prioritize actions rather than positional authority. Long term, I will design project engagement models that balance stakeholder input, decision rights, and value contributions, equitably applying stakeholder salience models and objective performance reviews to avoid power-based distortions. Fairness will help me build project cultures based on equity, transparency, and psychological safety, creating environments where every contributor feels valued, every voice matters, and every project is stronger because of the diversity and balance it protects. Together, these goals and ethical commitments shape not just how I perform, but how I lead, collaborate, and create sustainable project environments. Through this presentation, I've shared how my growth strategy is built on aligning short-term execution with long-term vision and grounding both in the PMI principles and the code of ethics. Responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty are not isolated concepts. They are the foundation of leadership, stewardship, stakeholder engagement, risk management, and systems thinking. My philosophy views project management as a dynamic, ethical discipline, one where collaboration, learning, and adaptation drive resilient, sustainable results. In my short term, I'm committed to mastering the industry and building the technical and relational skills needed to earn a project management role at ISEC. In the long term, I aim to not only step fully into project leadership, but to truly embody the principles of a values-driven PM generalist, delivering enduring value to every project, every stakeholder, and every team I have the opportunity to serve. With that said, learning doesn't end with a degree or a certification. It's a continuous commitment to lead with integrity, deliver with excellence, and build trust through every project and every decision. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I look forward to applying these principles and ethics in the next stages of my career and continuing to evolve into a values-driven project professional. Thank you.